So it's time to start the September 2nd Board of Douglas County Commissioners meeting. I want to thank everybody who's been able to join us, whether you're online or there in the courthouse. Just want to pass on a bit of information regarding how we will run our meetings on Zoom during this time of social distancing. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share the screen with the call. Participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their line when not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have a public comment on the agenda item or under regular public comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their names and address for the minutes. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The chat function has been disabled. A recording of this meeting will be made available on our website after each meeting. And with that, we'll jump into our agenda. Our agenda has a proclamation right at the beginning, just one item on the consent agenda, 3 regular items, then appointments, general public comment, commissioner and administrator miscellaneous. Would any commissioner like to read the proclamation, or would you like me to do it?
Feel free to do it, Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you. All right, we're happy today to celebrate a proclamation for the International Underground Railroad Month for September 2020. Whereas in recognition of Lawrence and Douglas County, Kansas as a powerful destination for authentic Underground Railroad history and in commemoration of all those involved in the Underground Railroad and the thousands of freedom seekers, and whereas the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom acknowledges the significance of the Underground Railroad and all those involved for its contributions to the eradication of slavery in the United States and as a cornerstone for more comprehensive civil rights movements that followed. And whereas, in appreciation of the inspiring efforts of the people of Lawrence and Douglas County, Kansas, and all those from around the world who have committed themselves to document and share the Underground Railroad to the National Park Service's National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom, and whereas Kansas is home to 21 different National Park Service's National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom sites, and whereas Lawrence, Douglas County, Kansas are well represented on the National Park Service's National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom with the African American Quilt Museum and Textile Academy, the Dr. John Doy House, the Grover Barn, the John E. Seward property, the Underground Railroad of Douglas County, Kansas program, the Wakarusa River Valley Heritage Museum, and the Watkins Museum of History. And whereas the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area, as a National Park Service partner, serves to bring together these many freedom sites as part of its mission to document and share the enduring struggle for freedom in Kansas. And now, therefore, it be resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas do hereby proclaim the month of September 2020 as International Underground Railroad Month in Douglas County, Kansas, and do commend this observance to all its citizens, adopted on this second day of September 2020. I don't know if Jim Ogle is here and has some comments. I don't think I see him. So with that, Michelle.
Jim is on there, Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you. Hi, Jim. Did you have some words you'd like to share with us?
Thank you, Commissioner. Jim Ogle, Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. And in the joy of Zoom, just as soon as you said my name, it said rejoining and disappeared. So I do appreciate the opportunity to very briefly speak and thank you for your commitment in calling attention to this. We have, in addition to this proclamation, 4 separate digital programs that are being promoted nationwide for sites in Douglas County as part of the National Park Service's Network to Freedom experience during this month. And I'm so excited that we're able to recognize these sites and the programs they offer to help people understand and experience more effectively the remarkable sacrifices made by freedom seekers and those who assisted them in the time before the Civil War, when it was so critical to help those freedom seekers find their freedom.
Thank you, Jim. Well said. And we appreciate all the work that you do with Freedom's Frontier, and especially this month with the Underground Railroad. Thank you very much.
And if you don't mind, I just would like to add just a comment that watching Jim and the Freedom's Frontier staff and the board and all of the partners putting together really important programs in the middle of a global pandemic with limited ability to get together, to communicate easily. I'm so impressed with their determination to make good, important programs move forward despite lots of obstacles. They're just doing terrific work, and this is such an important piece of that work this year. So Jim, thank you very much for all your extra effort, and your staff as well.
I will pass that on. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. There's no other comments. We'll move on to our consent agenda. We just have one item on the consent agenda. Any commissioner would like to remove a consent agenda item for discussion?
I would not.
No.
Okay. Is there anyone at the courthouse, Sarah, who has an agenda item they'd like to have removed for discussion?
No.
I believe Jill Jolliker, our assistant county administrator, is looking online. Anybody, Jill, waving their hand?
No, I don't see anyone.
Thank you. All right, with that, commissioners, I'd take a motion to approve consent agenda item 1.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think we got a 3-0 vote there, right, Commissioner Thelman? I didn't quite hear you. Did we lose Commissioner Thelman?
Nope.
Okay.
I said aye.
Good, thank you. Got it, 3-0. Awesome. Okay, we'll move on to our regular agenda items. 3.1 is a financial statement and conclusion of the fiscal year 2019 audit. And I'm sure Sarah has a lot to say, but we'll also hear from Brooke as well.
Thank you, commissioners. Tara Laughlin with Allen Gibson Hulick is also here as well to present our annual financial statements to the Board of County Commissioners. I think for Brooke and I particularly, this is one of our favorite days of the year. Having the audit completed and our financial statements prepared represents a massive amount of work from a variety of places inside of our organization to put this all together, and our and the work of Allen Gibson Hulick to review those statements for us. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we do here in terms of our financial accounting, and I guess I'll turn it over to Tara to walk you through the statements.
Good evening. I'm Tara Laughlin with AGH, Vice President in our Government Assurance Department. And I am here tonight, as Sarah mentioned, to present the results of Douglas County's 2019 financial statement audit. I think most of you were here the last couple years that I've done this presentation. And so the main thing, I'm required to discuss certain communications annually after the audit is complete, and tonight is the night that we do that. So before I go into that detail, I first off want to thank Sarah, Brooke, Carmen, all the staff really at Douglas County and over at the health department. As you all are aware, this year's audit was done 100% remotely due to the pandemic, which created some additional burden on Douglas County staff in order for us to communicate, get the support we needed electronically versus us just being on site and being able to access that information through the county system. So I just want to thank all of Douglas County's team during this process. We still got the financial statements done in the same time period as we usually do, even doing all that work kind of all at different locations. So I just appreciate all their hard work during the audit process. The scope of the services that we provide the county, of course, is we opine on the financial statements. And as you know, Douglas County elects to do a gap waiver, so their financial statements are presented on a regulatory basis, which is similar to the budgeting basis. So under the state of Kansas, entities can elect out of that full gap accrual world and do just the regulatory basis statements. And Douglas County has done that now for several years. So the scope of our audit is to opine on those regulatory statements. And we did issue an unmodified opinion as it relates to the regulatory basis of accounting, which means it's a clean opinion. You can rely on the information within those financial statements. The statements and footnotes associated with those statements are materially stated and can be used by users of those financial statements. As far as what we were required to communicate, there was a separate letter that was provided to the board. I'm going to highlight items within that letter that pertain particularly to the 2019 audit. Generally, the information within this letter is pretty similar to prior years, as our auditing standards haven't changed a whole lot from last year to this year. So first off, as I mentioned, the county does follow that regulatory basis of accounting, and there was really no changes in how that accounting operates this year. So if you're looking at last year's financials to this year's financials, there wasn't any significant changes to how that reporting is taking place. The second main item we're required to discuss is any accounting estimates within the financial statements. And there are 3 estimates. These are the same that the county has had for several years now. It relates to the compensated absences, footnote disclosure, the net pension liability disclosure, which is the county share of the CAPER's overall liability, and then also the incurred but not reported claims for health insurance. This is recorded as a liability on the county's financial statements due to the county being self-insured, having to estimate what kind of claims existed at year end that didn't turn up until after year end. Of course, not all estimates they're not known numbers. So we do review management's process for making those estimates, the assumptions used, the inputs, the resulting calculations, to make sure those estimates are reasonable. And in all cases, we did find that those estimates are reasonable. We're also required to go over audit adjustments. We only had 2 audit adjustments this year, and they're very similar to what we do every year. So we do book that incurred but not reported claims estimate during the audit process annually. And as a result of that, we also annually kind of update the beginning fund balance number due to that entry every year. So again, very similar entries to what we have done in the past, and only 2 entries that are really year-end type entries for the county. Next, we are required to discuss uncorrected misstatements as well. I always like to explain this term. What uncorrected misstatements are items that come up during the audit process that aren't actually reflected within the financial statements, because management has determined that those do not materially misstate the statements, and they're timing issues. So they're gonna self-correct next year. We look at these and we agree that it's not gonna mislead users of the financial statements, and we're okay passing not reflecting those in the statements themselves. They're required to present those to the board. So those are in a detailed schedule at the very end of that letter. And they relate to recording of certain accounts payable and encumbrances at year end. Again, they get reported in the next fiscal year, so they are reported. It's just a timing issue at year end. And we also do evaluate those to make sure if they had been recorded, it wouldn't impact budget violations or anything of that nature, and none of them would have had they been recorded. So we do check several things before we agree that they can be not recorded within the financials. Kind of buried within the letter is a paragraph I always like to point out. I kind of mentioned this at the top of my presentation, but we had no disagreements with management during the audit process. In particularly this year, everybody was very responsive. We were able to figure out how to get support transferred back and forth, doing it all electronically. So I do just like to point that out because it tends to get buried in the middle of the letter. The next kind of section talks about internal controls, and this is going to look the same as in prior years. Just due to the nature of the county and the size of the county, there is an ability of segregations of duties issues related to purchase orders under $20,000, but there are other controls in place kind of on the back end and with vendor setup on the front end that controls issues that come out of that. But we do like to report that, and it's not uncommon for entities the size of the county to have some of those segregation of duties types issues just for the cost benefit of the controls related to those areas. Then the rest of the letter kind of talks about other matters. These are matters that we disclose to all boards annually, whether they're public government entities or private corporation entities, just related to information technology risks that are out there in the world today, other risks that are out there, just to keep the board aware of those annually as you work throughout the year, to kind of have that in the back of your mind of other risks that are out there that could potentially impact the county. So that information is just for general use that we provide to all of our boards. As far as my required communications, that is it. So I will open it up to any questions, or if Sarah or Brooke want to add anything.
Thank you very much. Any questions, commissioners? No questions. Sarah or Brooke, anything you want to add?
I just won't miss an opportunity to thank Brooke for her extensive work on this process. She inherited this from me, and she has far exceeded anything that we had before in terms of coordination. And I know representatives of the Treasurer's Office are also on this call right now, and they are an extensive part of this team. So this really touches all facets of county government, and I really appreciate the work of our staff to make sure that we can pull these statements together and present it to the community.
Well, I think it also is worth noting in thanking people for this good work is that all of this was done in the midst of the budget season, as well as the CARES Act, incredibly intense and difficult process, especially for Sarah and Brooke, and just a whole lot of stuff going on that was out of the norm, out of the usual county calendars. So I think you all deserve just absolute extra credit and gold stars for great work above and beyond, and all with good humor, which was amazing. So congratulations.
Yes, thank you to all of you. Tara, thank you.
Yeah, thanks to your team, Sarah and Brooke. And you know, the problem with doing all this during the budget season and CARES Act is now we know what you're capable of and can expect nothing less from here on out. And no matter what we throw at you, we'll have these awesome audits. So this is really important stuff. I think a lot of times people don't recognize the care that our county administration takes with our budgets and how important that is with our tax dollars to make sure they're all being cared for. And Tara, thanks for doing the audit and sharing the good news. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. We enjoy working with the county.
Unless there's any other comments, I'll make a motion on this to accept the 2019 financial statement as prepared.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. Thank you. And moving on to our second agenda item, regular agenda item. Well, I made a mistake here, folks. It's not the first time. Is there any public comment? We didn't take any public comment on that item. Sorry for that. Anybody who'd like to provide public comment, that's a regular agenda item. Anybody there? Sarah?
There's no one here at the courthouse for that.
Jill online?
No.
Okay. Whew. Worried about that. Let's move on to the second agenda item, which is Resolution 0635, 10% distribution, 10% distribution. And I think Adam Raines is going to join us. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, correct. Adam Raines is here, as well as Stacy Kurtz with the Treasurer's Office. And the Treasurer's Office asked to have this item placed on the County Commission agenda related to distribution of tax payments. So I'll just turn it over to Adam.
Hi, Adam Raines, Acting County Treasurer. So it's to get rid of our 10% distribution that we do in December. The Douglas County Treasurer's Office is required by statute to deliver tax distributions to subdivisions within the county 5 times a year. So we have January 20th, March 20th, June 5th, September 20th, and October 31st. Additionally, for more than 30 years, the Board of County Commissioners have voluntarily awarded a December 20th distribution to cities, counties, schools, or city schools, townships, located particularly in Douglas County as per Kansas Statute 12-1678A. In 1986, the only Lawrence School District participated in the special distribution. In 2019, 4 counties, 7 schools districts participated for a total distribution of $8,417,393. Finalizing these distributions require 39 manual calculations. Our current tax software does not calculate the 10% abstract, nor will our new Tyler tax software. Aside from Douglas County, only 7 other counties within the state of Kansas sends this special distribution: Reno, Labette, Anderson, Cowley, Clay, Lyon, and Trigo. Because of the larger counties in our state do not participate, none of the software packages that meet Douglas County requirements can accommodate this process. By December 20th, the date by which the special distribution needs to be sent, there's also a deadline for the first half tax collection. So this is usually the busiest day of the year for our tax department, for our office. The first half tax collected by December 20th are also distributed in January 20th, 1 month later. Distributions for all but the 10% is fairly automated process, but before January 20th, 39 manual calculations reflecting the amount dispersed in December must again be performed for those counties and schools receiving the early distribution. It opens opportunities for errors, confuses auditors, both Douglas County and city and school auditors. They request information based on the tax year to compare the money received in a calendar year. It requires additional work for us to explain, provide them with a spreadsheet of the 10% distribution. Ending the distribution would require 90-day notice, revocation of the Resolution 6-35 passed by the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners on October 23rd, 2006. The governing statute KSA 12-678A states that each participating taxing subdivision should request a special distribution and show proof of the need for early distribution. There's no evidence that Douglas County has ever required that proof or needed such a request for the distribution. But after decades of relying on the December income, ending this distribution may be a temporary hardship for many of the participants. If request to seize Resolution 606-35 is granted, all affected entities would be notified by receiving the December 20th, 2020 distribution. We would notify them then. There would also be no distribution for December 2021, this allowing time for them to adjust their current budgeting processes. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Any questions, commissioners?
I don't have any questions. I guess my only question would be, so Adam, if somebody came back in a couple of years and could prove that there was a hardship, then would you be able to make an exception? Instead of what now seems like we just automatically do it for.
We do automatically do it. I mean, I suppose we could make that exception down the road. I guess my fear would be if we're doing it for one entity, we're going to do it again for another and another. So I think we would find ourselves in a similar situation. And maybe we can say for this 1 year, we'll do it. But going forward, we would not like to do it. So I think that would be open for discussion at a later time.
Okay. Thank you.
Adam, you said a couple of times counties, and that confused me a little bit. Did you mean townships or I was trying to figure out, do we send money to other counties from Douglas County?
There's a very select few, but I did mean cities, schools, townships, and not other counties. Sorry for that confusion.
All right, just checking there. And then my other question is, I thought we might get some feedback on this from some of those folks who we send money to on, but we really didn't hear any. I didn't hear any. Did you have communication from anyone, or how was it communicated that this was happening today to those organizations?
How did it get communicated that we're going to, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, so we have this resolution here who can impact these other entities, whether we're going to send it in December. How did you communicate to them that this was being considered today?
To my knowledge, I mean, we can ask Stacy Kurtz. She would be the director of the taxation department. We can ask her if that was communicated to them. To my knowledge, I don't know if anything was communicated to these entities. We would communicate to them with the December 20th distribution. That would be the last year we received that. Stacy, do you know if anything was communicated to them?
Stacy's on mute, so if Stacy's talking. Okay, so they will get the payment this year,
Yes.
but going forward, they wouldn't get it after that. Oh,
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. We did communicate with them, not about it appearing today. However, we did send documentation with our last distribution before when we were talking of starting the whole new tax process, and asked if anyone had issues with it. The only one that did was, I believe it was the Lawrence School District. But that is why we were going to notify everybody at this year. That way, next year it would be, it wouldn't be in place till next year.
And I guess I wanted to make this clear. I think it was implied in what Adam said. This is really an advancement of money. So this isn't holding, we have advanced, in essence, funds to different taxing entities before their payments were really received. So just in case there's some confusion about that, it's been an advancement of, in essence, county funds on that behalf.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Okay, this is a public comment item. So if you would like to provide public comment on item number 2, Sarah, is there anyone there at the courthouse who'd like to talk on this item?
No, there's not.
Okay, Jill, anybody online?
There's not.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, motions, comments?
If there aren't any comments, I will move to approve. I don't have the language in front of me, Commissioner Kelly, I'm sorry.
I've got it here if you want me. Yeah.
I can try to pull it up, or if you want to read it, I will make the motion.
Sure. It's for the revocation of resolution 0635 regarding 10% distribution.
Move to approve.
I'll go ahead and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Okay, that moves us on to item number 3, which is a consider rezoning Z20-00167, 69.6 acres at the northwest corner of East 800 Road and North 1500 Road from AG1 to CP. And I think I saw Mary Miller, our favorite county planner.
Thank you, commissioners. I am Mary Miller, City County Planner, and I will start out by sharing my screen. Oh, it says I'm disabled, maybe.
Give us a minute, Mary.
Okay, I'll calm down a little bit.
Commissioners, maybe while they're getting Mary set up there, one of the things we need to do on this item is divulge our ex parte communications. I don't know if now might be a good time to do that.
Sure. I did meet with the applicant, and I also met with some of the neighbors to discuss this.
Try again, Mary. I'm sorry.
So I also met with neighbors at Julie Linticum's property, and with 2 other neighbors joining, and then also with the applicant and her development partner. So Mary Wakeman and Randy. I don't have his last name, but I met with those on site as well.
Yeah, and we were not all there at the same time. We all met at different times, but we all met with that group as well. I met with Julie and her neighbors and Mary and her partner on this item as well. I also, just in case they didn't make it into the packet, got some email communication from Beth Easter, who consulted about roads, and Greg Beck. I can't remember if those quite made it into the packet, but I wanted to share their concerns as well. Okay. Let's get going here. Mary, you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay.
This, as you mentioned, is a rezoning request for approximately 69.6 acres from Ag 1 to CP, the Clustered Preservation District. The property is located in the northwest corner of the intersection of North 1500 and East 800 Road. It is located within the City of Lawrence urban growth area. This graphic shows the tiers of the urban growth area as established with Plan 2040. And the general location of the subject property is shown with the red dot. It is located in Tier 3. Tier 1 is actually the interior of the City of Lawrence. Tier 2 is within proximity, and properties in this area should be able to be served as city utilities, so development in this area is required to be annexed unless there's some reason that they can't be served at the current time. Properties in Tier 3 are not required to be annexed at this time. And the subject property is located about a mile west of the city limits. The property itself contains environmentally sensitive lands. On the west side, we have a stream corridor and we have native prairie. And on the east side, we have tilled property. This is a graphic that shows the proposed development. On the left side, we have future development 1, tract 1, which would be for the preservation of the environmentally sensitive lands. On the very east side, we have future development. It's should be labeled 2, tract 2, and this is just for future development. It doesn't have the environmentally sensitive lands. And then in the middle, we have the cluster of residences. When we review zoning applications, we go through the golden factors, and we also have some additional review criteria in our zoning regulations. So one of the first golden factors we look at is the zoning compatible with the zoning of the surrounding properties? The subject property is outlined in the light blue color, and the yellow line just signifies The division on the left would be undeveloped, and to the right would be where the residential development would be, but the whole parcel would be zoned CP. So the zoning in the area is primarily Ag 1 and Ag 2. There is a CP zoned area to the northwest. When the zoning regulations were adopted, properties that have been platted prior to 2006 and properties that have been divided through a certificate of surveys, their zoning converted to the CP district. Other properties converted to either Ag 1 or Ag 2. Many of the Ag 2 properties in this area do not have the lot size that's currently required for Ag 2. If these were to be divided, and these are the ones marked with red dots, if these were to be divided today, they would require rezoning to the CP district. But as they were divided prior to the adoption of the zoning regulations, and they were not divided through platting or a certificate of survey, their zoning converted to Ag 2. The proposed CP zoning is compatible with the existing zoning and rural residential development in this area. Another golden factor we looked at is the proposed use compatible with the current land use in the area? This is from the Douglas County Appraiser's Office. It shows most of the property is agricultural or residential. There is one property that's marked as vacant. With this rezoning and the associated platting, 60% of the subject property could be developed with agricultural uses, or residential uses. The other 40% would have to remain as open space. And this mix of open space and residential would be seen as being compatible with the land uses in the area. Another golden factor is, is it compatible with or consistent with the character of the area? And when we review the area, I typically use a 1 mile radius from the subject property, keeping the subject property at about the center. So this area is bounded by Highway 40 on the north, K10 on the east, North 1400 Road on the south, and East 700 Road on the west. And as you can see on the south side of the property, there's quite a bit of mix of uses. We have a quarry in the southwest corner. In the southeast corner, marked the number 2, we have commercial zoning. And this has been developed with a mini storage facility and a boat and RV storage. And the other portion of that parcel is also zoned commercial. And then we see the yellow triangle, and this is property owned by the U.S. government, and that's associated with Clinton State Park. The yellow dots are where I identified residences, and as always, these are approximate because I'm using the aerial maps. I could misread a building for a residence or miss a residence. But this is just intended to get an idea of where are the residences in the area. Looking at this, we can see there's a cluster of residences up in the northwest portion near North 1500 Road and East 700 Road. There's also a small cluster down in the southwest portion near the quarry. And then there's a cluster near the subject property in the intersection of East 800 Road and North 1500 Road. The rezoning would permit, as I mentioned, the development of 60% of this property as residential uses, and these would be on the east side, nearer East 800 Road. Now, this would increase the density of the area, but would be compatible with the residential development and the development pattern of the area. And clustering the residential uses in an area provides for efficiencies of utilities, road management, and other infrastructure. So approval of this rezoning request would be compatible and consistent with the character of the area. Another factor that we review is the property suitable for the uses to which it is currently restricted under this current zoning? And with these two zonings, Ag 1 and CP, the list of permitted uses are very similar, except that Ag 1 allows a wider range of conditional uses when approved with a conditional use permit. So with the rezoning, the property will actually have fewer use potential, fewer permitted uses available. The western portion of the property contains the environmentally sensitive lands and is not well suited for the uses except as open space in either district. The remainder of the property is well suited for the uses which are permitted in both the Ag 1 and CP districts. And these uses include agriculture, hobby farm, detached dwelling, group home limited, home occupations, type 1 and 2, although in the CP district, the type 2 would require a conditional use permit, and a daycare home. The property is well suited for the uses in either the Ag 1 or the CP district. Another factor we look at, another golden factor, is the proposed zoning and use compliant with the recommendations in the long-range plan. And this area was included in the West of K-10 long-range plan, and the future land use recommendations are shown here. Yellow would be low-density residential, and then the tannish area is residential office. And if you'll see, as I mentioned, right here, the right portion of the property, the eastern portion, would be left undeveloped, and that could be developed with offices, and the residential uses that would be in this area would be compatible with the recommendations, either one of these recommendations. Sorry. Another factor we review is the proposed zoning and use in compliance with the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. And Plan 2040 has several recommendations. It recommends that we seek conservation of identified sensitive lands that define Douglas County's rural character. And the rezoning and then the resultant land division would require that the sensitive lands be protected. It recommends that we minimize agricultural land conversion to other non-agricultural uses and maintain working lands and high-quality agricultural soils for future generations. And in this case, some agricultural land will be converted. It recommends that we minimize non-agricultural residential development outside the urban growth area. This is within the urban growth area. And that we provide housing opportunities while conserving the overall rural character of Douglas County. And this golden factor was reviewed in more depth in the staff report, and the conclusion was made that the rezoning request is in compliance with the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. And then finally, there's two other golden factors. One is how long has a property been vacant as zoned? Well, not technically vacant. It's zoned for agriculture and has been used agriculturally since the zoning regulations were adopted in 1966. And then finally, what would the gain to the public health, safety, and welfare be by the denial of the rezoning request? And as the rezoning request is in compliance with the recommendations in the long-range plan and is found to be compatible with the land use and the character of the area, there's no known gain to the public health, safety, and welfare to be gained by the denial of the rezoning request. One of the new review criteria that was added with the revised zoning regulations is what would the impact be of the rezoning and development on environmentally sensitive lands. These graphics just show the sensitive lands that I mentioned. The top left one shows the stream corridor, and the one on the right at the top, it shows the wetland that's within the stream corridor and also a small wetland area in the southwest corner. The picture at the bottom left shows the prime farmland as identified by NRCS, and that is located on both sides of the property. And the graphic on the bottom right shows a native prairie. And the subdivision regulations list the following as environmentally sensitive lands: regulatory floodway fringe, wetland, stream corridor, native prairie that's voluntarily listed for protection, prime farmland, stand and mature trees, and archaeological or historic sites. And Plan 2040 lists these as well as as well as rare plant and animal habitat and high quality ag soils, class 1 and 2. Native woodlands and urban tree canopy. The Kansas Biological Survey commented that there were no rare plant or animal habitat on the property, and there are no soils identified as class 1 or 2 on the property. Dividing the land following the rezoning to the CP or Cluster Preservation District would require the environmentally sensitive lands to be protected up to 60 or 40% of the site, and that these would be placed in the future, these would be protected with a temporary set-aside agreement. This agreement would last until the property is annexed into the city and would expire. It would last for 2 more years. This would allow the city or any other interested party that time to acquire the property if they wanted to continue those protection measures. After 2 years that's been annexed, that agreement would expire. And the protected environmentally sensitive lands are to be kept in the future development area as much as possible. So the rezoning would the rezoning would result in the platting of the property and the protection of environmentally sensitive lands. However, not all the environmentally sensitive lands will be protected. The native prairie, stream corridor, wetlands, and prime farmland on the west side will be protected, while the prime farmland on the eastern half will be included in the residential development. The rezoning will have an impact on some of the environmentally sensitive lands, but will result in the long-term protection of others. Another one of the factors that we've added with our zoning regulations, and that we're working on developing a metric so that we can do a more computerized evaluation, is what is the suitability of the property for agricultural uses. And as I mentioned before, planning and zoning and code staff, we're working with NRCS. We've worked with the Douglas County Extension agent, and he's contacting K-State professors for us. So we're getting a lot of information to help us develop the factors that go into the metrics. But NRCS recommends using the following. First, they recommend using either soil potential or soil productivity. And soil potential includes knowing the yield of the property and the value of the crops, and takes a lot of staff input. So soil productivity would be the factor that we would be more likely to use. This could be based on the NCCPI, the National Commodity Crop Production Index, and they also have a range production index. These are prepared by the NRCS, and so that information would be available to us. They also recommend using the land capability class, whether it's class 1, 2, or 3, as this would be the second most detailed factor. And finally, they recommend using the important farmland classification, whether it's prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, or unique farmland, as that is the broadest and most general factor. And we do intend to use these in the established LISA. And as you mentioned, a former and earlier rezoning, we're planning on having that ready for a study session as soon as possible. This just shows detailed soil information from the Department of Agricultural Soil Survey. There are no class 1 or 2 soils present, but as noted, prime farmlands are present, and the soil types that make up the prime farmlands are circled in green. This is taken from the NRCS website. It shows the National Commodity Crop Production Index, and they rank those, the productivity, from 1 to 100. And A is got the highest productivity, and it's 81. That's located in the stream corridor that goes through the native prairie. The areas marked as B and C, which is the majority of the site, are ranked at about 46 to 48, which means they're just slightly below average, but they're relatively average productivity. And then the remainder of the property, about 9% of the property, is below that. So from the information we have at this time, the west side of the parcel has the highest productivity soil, but that is, as I noted, within the stream corridor and the native prairie. It appears that the property is suitable for agricultural purposes, but of average productivity, with the majority having a productivity rating between 45 and 50. The Planning Commission considered this at their June 24th meeting and voted 9-1 to forward it to the County Commission with a recommendation for approval based on the findings in the staff report. And we did receive quite a bit of public communication for the Planning Commission meeting, as well as in communications that have been provided for the County Commission meeting. And looking through the communications, the condition of the roads and the impact this development might have on the roads appears to be one of the common themes. We had contacted the township trustee with the review of the preliminary plat before that went to the Planning Commission to ask if they had any concerns with the quality of the roads. And they noted that all the township roads are of pretty low quality right now due to the very wet seasons they've had recently. But they were not concerned with the impact the additional 10 houses would have. And they noted they would be making improvements within the next few years. And so as we received more communications for the County Commission meeting, I forwarded some of those to the township trustee, David Wolfkuhl, and asked if he could be present tonight in case the commission had specific questions. And he indicated that he would be present if possible. And I don't know if he's here today, but he was going to be here in case you had questions. There was a protest petition filed. It was a valid protest petition. And so among your action options, if you were to vote to approve it, it would take a unanimous vote due to that protest petition. Other options that would be available to you would be with a majority vote, you could return the item to the Planning Commission with direction for reconsideration. You could defer action and with direction to staff for more information, or you could deny the rezoning. And the applicant is present tonight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I expect we'll have some questions, but let's hear from the applicant first.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Patrick Watkins. I'm an attorney here, and I am representing Mary Wakeman, the applicant on the project. Mary has a statement that she would like to read, and I'll follow up with a few comments of my own. Mary, are you available to take it? I just saw her name, but it disappeared. Oh, there she is.
Shoot.
There you
There,
go.
can you hear me now? Okay, thank you, commissioners. I'm trying to get to my screen. I appreciate the opportunity this evening. Hang on, trying to figure out. Here I go. Good evening. My name is Mary Wakeman. I am the owner of the subject property. I would first like to thank the Douglas County Commissioners for their time this evening and for the services you provide for this county. It is greatly appreciated. I would also like to say thank you for the opportunity to work with Mary Miller and the staff with the Planning and Development Services. Their research, time, detail, and thorough review of the application and the reports presented has been greatly appreciated, and these services provide a valuable resource to our community. The urban growth area adopted in the comprehensive plan extends directly to the west and to Kanwaka Township. The west of K-10 plan also specifically calls for office and residential uses of this property. These planning documents are meant to provide guidance and direction for conscientious growth that preserves and enhances the spirit of this community. The west of the K-10 plan specifically directs us to develop unique neighborhoods that are sustainable and yet remain viable for over the long term, and to develop their neighborhoods for potential new development that keeps with the natural layout of the land in mind. This is the plan for Kanwaka Prairie Estates. The property has been in my family for multiple generations. We have maintained its use and it has become a part of our family. It is my personal belief, as well as the vision of my late father, Elmer Johanning, to have this property serve its community. It is fulfilling on a personal level that our personal desires for this properties meet with the community needs directed by the Horizon 2040 plan and the West K-10 plan. To us, this property and the proposed plan is the embodiment of our family past, our present, and for our future generations. From reading and hearing the various comments from the neighbors, I can only express a sincere empathy for their concerns and would hope they would see the true benefit which Kanwaka Prairie Estates has to offer. Kanwaka Prairie Estates will invite an opportunity for individuals to raise their family and be a part of what I, as well as the neighbors of Kanwaka Township, have had the pleasure to experience and enjoy the rural living. This subdivision, with its minimum 3-acre estate size, can truly materialize into a rural setting and remain with its ag character of the community it has served. The preservation of the historic native prairie will allow the community to benefit from one of the true undisturbed native grass areas in this area. We hope it will provide a future green space that will have the potential to serve as an educational nature trail for many generations to come. The Kanwaka Prairie Estate embraces the lofts requirements set by the City of Lawrence and Douglas County. Thoughtful rural residential is coupled with the sizable preservation of native prairie and sensitive soils, which makes this ideal configuration for the property. For these reasons, this project has been supported by the planning staff and was recommended for approval by the County Planning Commission. I respectfully ask that the Commission approve this rezoning request. Thank you again for your considerations. Patrick?
Thank you, Mary. Commissioners, I just have a few comments to add. From the outset, I think it's appropriate to recognize the growth to the west of K10 is simply part of our reality. It's recognized in the county and the city's planning documents. The urban growth area for Lawrence includes much of the Kanawha Township. The west of K10 plan actually calls for a commercial node at the intersection of North 1500 and East 800 Road. And this property is forecasted as a maximum use for office and residential uses. And it's noted as low density residential, but that use as defined in that west of K10 document is actually quite a bit more dense than what we're talking about here. So this rezoning request is less intensive than the maximum uses contemplated for this area in the comprehensive plan in the west of K10 area plan. But the proposal is still able to achieve the ambitious and additional planning goals of distinguishing rural settings, addressing environmental concerns, appropriately planning for future infrastructure, all of those things that the County Planning Commission, the County Commission itself worked so hard to establish in the comprehensive plan. And there are a number of other goals that have been addressed by this particular project. And I'd encourage the County Commission and the planning staff to make recommendations on how this project itself could better meet those goals noted in the comprehensive plan or the area plan. The staff report is thorough in its application of the golden factors. We agree with the staff's analysis and we appreciate their thoughtful and thorough review. I would encourage the commission to consider those factors when reviewing the suitability for this rezoning request, and they're laid out in depth in the staff report. One possible concession to consider at this meeting, and this is something that I talked with Mary Miller about today, would be to require that the rezoning be conditioned on the platting that has been initiated by Ms. Wakeman. The rezoning on its own would entitle Ms. Wakeman to submit a new set of platting, a new plat application that would allow up to 12 lots. Her current plan in this application that she has already submitted, she has a preliminary plat and she'd like to move forward with a final plat, contemplates 10 lots. And it's something that she wants to do, and that's the full intention. But if the county commission desired to have some limitation to restrict this rezoning to simply 10 lots, that's something that could be considered here. And I wanted to just offer that as a concession immediately. It's something that Ms. Wakeman and I have spoken about, and it's certainly something that we feel comfortable offering from the outset. There's been a flurry of recent correspondence, and I have a few comments on that. There's a petition that has been submitted, which has been signed by a number of surrounding property owners. And I would note that there are several signatories on that petition that are not in the surrounding area. Some are tenants, some are not neighbors, and many are multiple entries for the same property, but there are a lot of signatures. I certainly don't want to downplay the fact that there is some organizing taking place, but upon a review of those signatories, I do want to make that note. And I did go through the exercise of mapping where these signatories live. And what I found is that a significant percentage of them come from the Clinton Lake Estates development, which is about a mile to the west of the subject property. And if you were to zoom out on the interactive map, Mary's map in the planning and the staff report doesn't show it exactly, but if you were to zoom out a little bit further, what you would find is a rural development just to the west that has over 40 acres, over 40 units and about 160 acres. And there's more additional residences immediately in the surrounding areas. This is the primary user of the road. This is the predominant density in the area. And frankly, in my opinion, this is the elephant in the room. There's a very large rural development just to the west. When you look around the surrounding 1 mile radius from the subject property, as Mary noted, there are 2 other developments that have about equivalent density in an 80-acre parcel. These are just to the northwest, and these are shown on page 11 of the staff report. And so I think the correspondence suggests a few things. First, rural residential is not new to this area. These are developments of, there are 3 developments of 10 or more homes, and these are flourishing developments, especially the large development at Clinton Lake Estates. But more importantly, the primary and really the only significant concern that has been brought to your attention in the correspondence is the condition of North 1500 Road. It's noted in almost every piece of correspondence. And so I would like to address that briefly, but I would make the recommendation to the County Commission to rely on the input of the Kanawha Township representative, who I know is on the line, David Wolfcole, the County Public Works Department, and rely on their assessment of the condition of the road. Seek their input and seek their input on the plan for maintenance and improvements to the road. It's important from the applicant's perspective that we recognize that the burden to maintain a significant road like North 1500 should not be the burden of one property owner alone. A 10-lot development is not the sort of development proposal that can carry improvements for this size of road. And the maintenance and improvements are a county and a township obligation. The cost that necessarily must be spread over the entire area. Staff report acknowledges the conversation with the Kanawha Township, and it recognizes that the road can support the existing development, and that's why it recommends approval. But in that same line of thought, road budgeting is a function of public funding and property taxes, and density and property values drive that analysis. These 10 lots, while they will contribute to traffic, they'll also make a tangible difference in the available funding for maintenance and improvements to the road, something that is apparently needed here. Another key issue from the correspondence is that this area is productive and popular among those living in the area. Development is going to continue to come to this area west of K10, and it's recognized as really one of the only feasible areas for expansion of the city of Lawrence. Does that mean that it should be developed right away? Absolutely not. Does it mean that this development should be approved? No. But this is a tasteful development. It's modest in size, it's incremental in intensity, it's less than what is eventually forecasted. It meets the planning needs of the community, and the staff report notes if more development proposals are submitted for consideration, they should be evaluated on their own merit based on the factors of the proposal and the surrounding area. Further development is not guaranteed after this project. I'd also note that the energy that's been put into stopping and obstructing this modestly sized development is really remarkable. It's particularly remarkable considering that the same energy could be channeled toward working with the Public Works Office or working with the Kanawha Township on creating a plan for improving or maintaining the road and the ability to address the concerns that have been asserted, which really cannot be the subject of an obligation of an individual development. This project brings 7 more lots into the area of West K10 than what is already currently allowed under the ag zoning designation. This is well within the amount that's been the subject of significant planning and forecasting. The county can rely on the hard work which has been put forth in the comprehensive plan. It can rely on the staff's analysis. It can rely on the Planning Commission's recommendation. It can reap the rewards of thoughtful planning, environmentally sensitive planning, and it can approve a project that meets the ambitious goals of the comprehensive plan. We're available for any questions. We'd be happy to respond. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mary. Commissioners, do you have questions for the applicant or for Mary Miller?
I have a couple of questions for Mary, and I'm also wondering, are Tanya Voigt and Chad Voigt in the meeting?
Yes,
for the
they
county?
are.
Okay. So right off the bat, I just want to understand the cluster development standards that the applicant is supposed to meet if this proposal goes through, particularly regarding the road, the one road that that's set for these 10 houses.
Well, when we recently revised the regs, the zoning regs, and then the sub-regs, we changed what you could do for land divisions in the urban growth area. Before, your only option was to do a certificate of survey, regardless of how many lots or RDPs were created, and to provide a shared common drive for all of them. That would be a public or a private drive that was privately maintained. And that was seen as quite an obstacle to a lot of developments. It was difficult to get the property owners to agree on a maintenance program. So with the revised regulations, you can still do cluster subdivisions or cluster certificates of survey, but you're limited to no more than 4 RDPs. And so this property with 60 acres could do 3 certificates of survey, each with 4 RDPs. And that would be one way to do it. They would each have their own shared private drive. However, with the environmentally sensitive lands on the west side, that's not seen as a very viable option. So platting it would put all the residences on the east side. It would provide a public road so that we don't have that issue with property owners trying to maintain a long stretch of road. It's within the limit of a cul-de-sac within the county. And the same provisions with the certificate of survey that we had that required you to protect environmentally sensitive lands, we carried that over to platting in the urban growth area, so that you still have to do the same protection. The 40% future development area was carried over. So almost everything is the same with the plat as it was with the certificate of survey, except now you can do the public road and you can do more because we just reduced the number of parcels you could make with the certificate of survey. Did that answer your question or?
Well, yes and no. I guess I'm aware that that this project came back to the Planning Commission last week for a variance on the type of road that would be provided to this development. And so I don't know if this is a conversation to bring Tanya and Chad into, but if I understand right, one of the purposes of the new subdivision regulations and this cluster development is that the applicant gets to have higher density in this rural area as long as they're willing to kind of reward the county with a set aside of some environmentally sensitive land and to meet some higher standards for subdivision, rural subdivisions, so that they can be more easily annexed into the city and not be kind of a rural neighborhood that the city has to build around. And so I guess I'd like to know what the expectations are of the county for cluster development in the standards of the road that we would expect in return for those higher density and for the.
Right. And if I could just respond to that variance question, and then it's Mary Miller, City County Planner. And so we have not done a subdivision in the urban growth area since 2006 because they were just not permitted. And so when we had this very first subdivision come forward, we noticed that there was a provision in the public improvement standards that if you put a road in the urban growth area, it has to be built to city standards, which means it has to be paved and it has to have curb and gutter. So we contacted Kanwaka Township and they don't have the ability to maintain a paved road. And the curb and gutter is seen as not really a valuable stormwater measure since it would just connect to the ditch on 1500 road. There's no connecting stormwater measures. And so that was why the variance was requested. In addition, the Planning Commission voted to initiate a text amendment to revise that section of the code. When Plan 2040 went through and set tiers of the urban growth area, we see where development is expected. And tier 2 would seem very reasonable to pave the roads and build them with curb and gutter so that when it's annexed, we already have the city streets. But if tier 3 may not annex for 20 years, then the paved roads, the city streets, especially if they're not able to be maintained, when the property is annexed, we have a road that still needs to be developed. And the Planning Commission discussed perhaps doing an agreement not to protest the formation of a benefit district so that when it's annexed, the people living along that road and using it would pay into the benefit district. But the Planning Commission was concerned that if it's too far down the road, property is going to change hands several times and they'll have issues similar to Queens Road where the property owners have no idea that they're liable to pay into an assessment, a benefit district. And so they did approve the variance and they recommended the initiation of a text amendment so that we can look through that and other public improvement standards that we have not reviewed since 2006, since we haven't done any subdivision regulations. And now that Plan 2040 has been adopted, to go through and make sure that they're compatible. And so, you know, the county staff is ready to discuss that. I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. So I guess, so we have a property that's in tier 3, but it's 1 minute and 45 seconds away in terms of a drive from the intersection of Bob Billings, and it's the future meant to be a pretty busy major collector road. But we've, with the Planning Commission's action last week, I just want to understand, they granted a variance to give away the higher standard that the county was expecting for the privilege of putting in a subdivision. And they also gave away the necessity, the requirement of an annexation agreement without, that would cause that subdivision to not protest road improvements and kind of annexation into the city at city standards. So really, so I would just like to note that on their very first rural subdivision, on our new subdivision regulations, we have already a variance and a request for an amendment to the regulations, and a whole conversation that the Planning Commission wants to have as to whether tier 3 rural land should even be considered for this denser kind of development and higher standards that the county would like to impose in the future. So I just want to bring that up. And then another question, and this is a question about the anticipated, the value of the set aside future development areas. So the sensitive lands that really are kind of key to all of this, like higher density is the reward to the developer for being willing to set aside 40% or so of the land as open space for a while and future development if no conservation easement is put on the land, or if the city or the county don't pick the land up within 2 years of annexation. So has there been any conversation at the city that you know of creating some program, some funding mechanism, some way to make that scheme, that idea a reality, that on annexation there would be money set aside to buy sensitive land?
Well, when the city does projects, as a rule, they don't buy the sensitive land or the park land that's being donated. There's usually some negotiation with the developer. When property's annexed, typically it's done by a developer, and they have plans to create greater density when they would hit in streets, more sidewalks. And so the ones I've seen, the Parks and Rec Department have worked with the Municipal Services Operations Department to make it a plan where maybe the city will put in all the sidewalks in exchange for the parkland. And they certainly could outright purchase it. You know, that's one of their options, but they have other ways, and they prefer to use the other ways because it's more cost effective. And they usually work that out with the property owner. We had another property that had, environmentally sensitive lands. It had a temporary set aside agreement, and the property owner that was selling it and the new buyer wanted assurance that that was going to be kept as parkland. So they contacted us, and the Parks Department was working with them to find a way to make sure that would be. However, they decided not to buy the land, so that didn't move forward. So there are avenues, but first the Parks Department or someone in the city needs to decide that they want that property. A lot of times people offer open space just because they don't want to maintain it. Maybe it's a drainage easement, and the Parks Department is not really interested in that, but they are interested in prairie and stream corridors, things that could be recreational facilities, and also kind of like Mary's Park, the park. So they do have avenues, but I don't think they want to set aside a dedicated funding stream, because that would probably not be one of their first choices.
Mhm. I guess, and the county certainly doesn't have a dedicated way of picking up these native prairies or sensitive lands at the drop of a hat. And certainly, I just think it's important to recognize that there's really no mechanism by which we can promise that these sensitive lands won't just go on to development when the annexation 2-year limit expires. When the, and I'll quit in a little bit and let the other commissioners ask some questions, but last week, I watched the video of last week's variance item, and I do remember that it was said that as they were granting the variance and the no protest, the getting rid of the no protest annexation agreement, that they, I think you maybe reported that the city engineer said that he wouldn't mind if there was a variance so that the road would be gravel rather than city grade asphalt and curb and guttering, as long as an annexation agreement was part of the deal, so that there wouldn't be a protest to improvement of the roads upon annexation. So I don't know if there was any follow-up with the engineer since that meeting. So their decision is in contradiction.
Mary Miller, City County Planner, and no, I have not followed up with the city engineer yet. And actually, the Planning Commission said no agreement not to protest the formation of a benefit district, but they still have to do the annexation agreement. And when a property comes in for annexation, the city usually wants to know what is a development proposal. They don't typically annex property without a development proposal unless someone's needing city services. Their septic system has failed, and I doubt that will happen on these properties for a long time. And as part of that, seeing the development project, we can get the streets prepared and put in the requirements. They actually have to give us how they're going to fund street improvements. And so a lot of those improvements are made later. So even though they did say they were not going to do the agreement not to protest, and I will contact the engineer later, I just haven't had time. There still are other avenues to make sure the roads do get upgraded and not on the city money. And was that your question?
But yes, thank you. Not necessarily any kind of mechanism to fund that improvement through the neighborhood itself, through the developer. So the expectation would then be on the city to make those improvements?
No, it would be on the developer. The city's very strict. When you annex, you have to give us a plan. How are you going to extend utilities? How are you going to upgrade infrastructure? And you have to explain how you are going to do it. And we've had many annexation requests come forward that have been denied because they wanted the city to put in a lift station for the sanitary sewer, or the city to make other improvements. And the city's tightened up their stance on annexation. And basically they want the developer to bear the brunt. And the developer can start an agreement not to protest the formation of a benefit district at that time. And that would be something all the property owners would be aware of. I think the Planning Commission was just shy about creating something that might not be used for quite a long time.
Okay. Thank you. I'll stop for now and let the others get some questions in. Thank you, Mary. Thanks very much.
Mary, my question has to do, and I don't understand the difference between prime farmland, class 1 soils, and how we decided that 50% isn't enough to make this. I mean, can you walk me through that? Because we've got class 1 and 2 soils, we've got prime farmland, we've got different percentages, and then somehow we come to the fact that it's not agricultural land. And I can't understand that. So can you walk me through that?
Yes, and we did not decide it was not agricultural land, but the idea is, what is its potential? You know, because we have to rate almost all vacant land in the county as agricultural. And if we're going to allow the development of some over other, we have to be able to say, this is better agricultural land, or this land is better for agricultural protection. And so we look at various things. For instance, on this property, the presence of the native prairie in the stream corridor is a negative because you don't want people to farm that. And then the NRCS says to use the class, they use productivity would be the first one they would recommend using. And so when you look at that productivity chart, we don't have our factors set yet. So you can come to a different determination than I have, but I look at 100 to 50 being high. So I would assume 75 to 100 is really good ag land. 50 to 175 is very good. And then 25 to 50 is probably average, a little less than average. And so using that, since it's right at 50, a little bit less, I saw it as probably average or slightly less than average agricultural productivity. And so taking that into account, along with the fact that another thing they tell us to look at is what are the class of soils, is 1, 2, and 3. And we don't have 1 and 2. And so that comes into play as being a negative. And then we look at, is it prime farmland? And it is. There's a portion of prime farmland. And so it's not a matter that I can say this land has absolutely no value as agricultural land, because it does. And we are removing some agricultural land from productivity. And so in reviewing it, when I try to evaluate, should it be protected? Then I look at, was the productivity above 50? Are there environmentally sensitive lands on it that are not suitable at all for agricultural? And that's where I arrived at my decision that it could be suitable for development, even though I'm not saying it's absolutely not suitable for agriculture.
Oh, but like you mentioned, we don't really have metrics for that, because in the comprehensive plan, it says that we should preserve farmland, but you're saying this isn't worth preserving?
Mary Miller, City County Planner. I think what I'm saying is we need to evaluate the farmland, because it doesn't say preserve all farmland. It says to preserve high quality farmland, and also to preserve agricultural land, and also to allow residential development. So in evaluating that, we have to come up with our determinations. Where should residential development happen? Well, in the UGA, and probably closer to the city limits. If this was at the very outside boundary of the UGA, that may seem like less suitable for residential development. And we are working on our factors, our metrics. Tanya Voigt and I have been working, and we've created draft metrics. We don't want to use those yet until we've tested them. So we field test them on several properties, and we're getting back with an RCS. So we're hoping before you get another zoning application or 2 zoning applications, that we actually have a chance to meet with you and explain the zoning, because it will give us a number. And it'll look at the different factors. It'll rank each one, which is most important. And at the end, you'll get a score. And then you have like a report card that if it's above this much, you really should protect the land. And if it's below that, then maybe it's not quite so important. And then it could even give a score that says it could be developed without any real loss of prime farmland. And we hope to have that ready for you shortly. And one of the things about that is when we have our pre-application meeting with applicants, if we feel that it's got prime farmland that is really not suitable, we let them know. And if we tell them that likely we're going to recommend denial, you'll never see those applications. Unless they just feel that they have a good case. They're totally welcome to submit the applications anyway. But a lot of times, if we let them know that based on the information we're looking at, it doesn't look like a good candidate, then many times they just won't submit the application. But we do hope to soon not be doing this manually and kind of making it's better than what we used to do, because we didn't even consider it, but it's not where we want to be.
Okay. And then my next question is, there seems to be a conflict with Plan 2040 and the tiers and the K10 plan. And when I looked at the tier map, it doesn't really align with properties. It's sort of, in some ways it cuts through properties. So a certain property could be in tier 2 and it could be in tier 3. And I'm concerned about that based on what Commissioner Thellman just said and what the variance just did was say, I don't know how they're going to manage that, where you may have a property that, you know, doesn't need certain infrastructure, but just over some line, it does need that. And do you have any thoughts on how tier 1 to how tier 2 and tier 3 don't line up? And then a second question is, any thoughts on the conflict between a plan that says that's where we're supposed to grow and actually puts a commercial node out at 1,500 and 800, but yet is not to be given any infrastructure for 20 years? How do we, as a commission, align those two ideas?
Well, the planning director explained to the planning commission how the tiers were established. So they worked with our engineers, primarily our municipal services and operation engineers, because a lot of times where infrastructure can go depends more on contours and road crossings more than it does property lines. And someone asked, why don't we just draw the tier 2 line straight up and make it a square, just a square box? And that's the reason, because they want to look at what they realistically believe city services can serve within 20 years. Now, the idea is things outside tier 2 will not, they don't expect them to annex within 20 years, but it's possible that they can. You know, things are fluid. And we may have to update all our long range plans, but the reason they're long range is we don't want to come in, and even if we know that in 30 years we want something to be industrial or commercial, that we encourage residential development now, because then your future long range plan is not very viable, because when they come into the city, people are already living there in homes, and that's our designated commercial area. So it is a long way out, but long-term planning, letting people know 20, 30 years ahead that what they want to do and what we're planning to do conflict, it helps us to make sure we have some dedicated areas where we want offices or we want commercial, and we aren't allowing everything to be developed. And so when it comes into the city, we don't have any places to put those in general nodes throughout the new city area.
And commissioners, if I may, Jeff Crick with the City County Planning Office. The tier lines were drawn based upon a couple of various factors: fire response rates from inside the city, the Municipal Services and Operations Department. The line that we're talking about kind of in the vicinity here is based upon the ridge line and where the sewer and waterfalls would actually go as they start moving around there. So it would require a pretty substantial infrastructure investment to push the water over the ridge and get it on that side, or bring the sewer back from the other side of the ridge. So that's how the line was drawn there. Excuse me. The reason we didn't tie it to the properties and kind of at the parcel lines is because those shift so much over the course of the years, while the real static factors inevitably are your ridge lines, your service boundaries for fire, medical, police and sheriff services, and those kind of items. So we tied it really to those factors and not necessarily the property lines, as they can shift and come and go. And if I may also address your question about the conflict between the West of K10 plan and Plan 2040. The Planning Commission and staff had identified both the West of K10 plan and the K10 and Farmers Turnpike plans as being key updates to come after Plan 2040 was adopted, because we realized during the process, both of those plans were adopted about 2008, 2009. So there has been some shifting in both the community's values and also shifting in the way that infrastructure and development is happening. So we think both of those plans would be very high on the list for an update going forward because of those exact reasons that you mentioned, Commissioner.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Jeff, because I remember that from our many Plan 2040 discussions. So that was a later question that I had not got to yet. So thank you for dropping that in there. I want to make space for our other commissioners for questions or.
Okay. I have a lot of questions, so I've been trying to decide where I want to begin. I think I want to touch base real quick with some questions I have with something that Mary just said regarding the long range plan. When was this long range plan done? I can't remember, Mary.
I don't recall off the top of my head. I think Jeff might have that information. I think he mentioned Jeff.
The West of K10 plan, Commissioner?
Yes.
Certainly. That plan was completed during the course of 2014 effectively. It was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners in 2015 in January, and the Lawrence City Commission also in January of 2015. But the bulk of the work would have occurred in 13 and 14.
Okay. Because one of the things that was mentioned was do these plans so that people know what to expect and there isn't any conflict with what your long range plan is. And so I'm curious, so in 2014, when this was being done, were the neighbors out there told that, hey, we're going to do this plan, and just an FYI, over here on this corner, we're planning that this is going to be office space someday? What kind of communication is there? I think I asked this question on another planning issue we had last year, but how is that communicated to the people who already live there that, oh, hey, and by the way, where your house is, we're planning that this is going to be a business maybe in the next 20 years. So
I wasn't here. I'm looking to confirm that date actually, because I think I may have the wrong date on my monitor right now. So let me also confirm that 14/15 is the correct date while I'm looking here.
Okay.
As part of the process when we do a sector plans is we do send notices out. We do have public meetings. It does go to the Planning Commission for review, and it does come ultimately for the County Commission and the City Commission's approval. But it is a pretty extensive public input process where we try to have meetings and various surveys and other mechanisms to kind of share that information, kind of actually to gather that information, and then to share it back out as it's accumulated throughout the course of the project. So they are a very extensive inputting process that does go on, and they do have a lifespan, if you will. They do come to a point where they just they need an update, or they need to be refreshed as policies and things have changed. We've identified these two as being, West of K10 plant and the K10 and Farmers Turnpike plant as being two that need a bit of a refresh given the Plan 2040 change. And I am still waiting for my computer to give me that date. So my apologies, I don't have it real quick for you. I'm working.
Well, that's okay, Jeff. While you're looking for that, I just have questions about how this works, because one of the comments in the packet was that when this long range plan was done, nobody realized that there was environmentally sensitive land there. So we're in the process of those kind of things looked for when we're deciding that, hey, this is what we have future hopes for our growth here. Without, I guess it didn't seem like maybe there was much research done, or maybe there wasn't much focus at that time on environmentally sensitive lands. I don't know. I'm just trying to get an idea of what the process is, because that seems like a pretty big thing to miss.
Gary Miller, if I can be part of that. If you remember when we did the zoning regulations, we wanted to add native prairie to the list of environmentally sensitive lands. And there was quite a lot of discussion about whether we should include it or not. So we were only able to add native prairies that are voluntarily listed. Basically, where prairies are is not public knowledge. There may be some mapped prairies, but they're not out on public maps. And so that information is not available to the public or to planning staff. It wasn't. We have some information now where we can look and see where we think some prairies are. But we're only allowed to protect native prairies that have been voluntarily listed. And that's just based on the action that various commissions took on the zoning regulations and the subdivision regulations. Now, they almost always try to put floodplain into a green space. We have a stream corridor protection strategies in both the county and the city. So these come into play whenever land's divided, but that has been added. I think after 2006, environmentally sensitive lands were added. But as far as saying you can't develop near a stream corridor, or you have to have a special land use designation because there is a stream corridor, you typically people develop around it and observe the setbacks. So I think the principal environmentally sensitive feature on this property is a native prairie, which today still isn't something that we recognize that we can protect unless it's been voluntarily listed. And at the point where we can protect all native prairie and we have a map that shows them, then our long range plans can include them. However, I know the fear of some people is that when people know they have native prairie and they want to develop, it may be gone before they come in with the application. So it's a real balancing act on that.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mary. And then, okay, so something I really struggle with is compatible to the area. And I know that you explained how you look at the area and the surrounding roads that kind of that created this square. So there's I guess what we can call the cluster neighborhood up on, what is it, 17, north or east 767 that comes right off of Highway 40. And there are 7 residences on that road, which is an interesting road. It's like a one lane. I'm not even sure what that road's made up of. It was quite a hodgepodge. But so, that area, depending on if you drive by 700 road or 800 road, is anywhere from 1.5 miles to 2.3 miles away as you drive from this proposed project. And it's only 7 houses. Then there's a little cluster neighborhood on North 1532, which is up on the hill, consists of 5 houses. And it has an amazing, very nice asphalt road that leads up there. But it's, once again, it's about 1.5 mile drive from the proposed, this proposed project. And there's only 5 residences in that cluster. So then when I look at the 1 mile stretch from 800 to 700, I mean, these are nice big lots set back off the road. So I guess I'm trying to understand how plopping 10 houses down in that field is compatible with that area.
Mary Miller, City County Planner. I think it depends on the definition of compatible. I would not say it is exactly the same, that we're going to mirror what's on the right side on the left side of the road. But what I look at is it something that would be incompatible? Is it something that would change the character of the area? And the area is, in my view, rural, agricultural with residential uses. So this will increase the density, and that will add more residences to the area. But I don't see it as being incompatible. That it would be, I would think a large factory would be incompatible. I think a large buildings, but something of similar size, similar types of uses, being slightly more dense. A mix of density provides variation if you want to allow different types of homes in an area. So you can have different densities and different types without saying you're actually incompatible. We don't have to have uniform lot sizes. So it may be a difference of opinion, and in your opinion, maybe it's not compatible, but then just in the staff report, I saw that, in my opinion, it was compatible.
And Michelle, just to point out, that's kind of the point of the new zoning regulations, is that we're having these conversations, because in the past, we, 2 years ago, had a cluster development south of town that was 21 lots or 20 or something like that. It was huge and it was super impactful. Did it meet the character of the area? No one knows, because there was no neighbor notification, there was no rezone process, and it was administratively approved. So you guys are kind of seeing these for the first time, and they're, being dumped on your plate. But this has been an ongoing thing for several years in the county, and something that's been kind of a tug and a pull from different perspectives as to whether, is a 20 lot subdivision in the county compatible with the area when you're 4 miles outside of town. I'm not sure. But what we wanted to do was get it up in the forefront, provide neighbor notification, and be able to have a forum like this to make that decision.
No, and I appreciate that, and that's probably why there's so many questions, is because we're all new to this, and I appreciate that. I think, Mary, we probably have differences of opinion on what compatible is, because if I have a big lot out there, and all my neighbors are far away, and then suddenly I'm gonna look next door and see an office building, or across the road and see 10 houses. So we will just have different opinions of what compatible is. I have some more questions, but I'm gonna turn it over to my fellow commissioners, because I think they have some more questions also.
So I do. I think we'll just keep going round and round. And you're right. I think this is a long conversation because this is our first conversation, and this is a precedent-setting proposal, and it's complicated. So I know we want to get it right. Whoops. And I want to. David Wolfcool, you've been so kind to participate in this meeting, and thank you for your patience as we go round and round. You're in a really thankless job as a trustee of a township. I live in Grant Township, and I know for a fact that being the guy who gets all the calls on the roads is a hard job to have. I want to know what the actual plans are for the improvement of 1500 Road. And that may be more of a question beyond you. That may be a Jeff Crick question in terms of that becoming an extension of Bob Billings Parkway. That may be a Chad Voigt question in terms of county road improvements. I just want to know what the plans are for 1500 Road if we're going to start thinking about putting subdivisions on it, with lots of neighbor concerns about the width of the road, the depth of the ditches, not so much the rutting, but what's the actual plan for improvement of, allowing ag implements and all the variety of people who travel that road. Anyone?
If I may, if it's okay if I speak.
Please.
I'm David Wolfcool, Kennewick Township trustee. We don't have any set plans. We do realize that there is some concerns in the area. It has been our plan in past years to upgrade and fix some of the areas. There's several narrow areas in the intersection at 800 and 1500 it can have some improvements. With this development coming in, we feel like that if we don't have a major disaster like last year where our rock budget was just most of our budget, we should be able to help fix up this road and going forward handle the traffic better. I did a quick study of traffic counts. If we say as an average, and it's kind of holds true that each house goes to town five times a day, we'll increase the traffic on that road by about 15%, which isn't a huge amount, but it is an increase. So that is where we look at is strictly traffic counts. That road is chlorided right now. It does meet our standards for chloride, so it is above the grade of a lot of roads that we have that is not chlorided. But yes, we do realize we have several narrow areas on that road, and it has been in discussion the last couple of years to fix. It's just budget restraints have stopped us from doing it. So if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. And it does. Thank you very much. And Chad or Jeff, do you see in terms of a more long range look at that road as kind of a major collector, the kind of extension of Bob Billings? What's the long range plan for that road?
I think this would go directly from township to city. It would go from being a rock road to being improved for city use. And so it wouldn't go through a step where we took it over.
Okay.
In Transportation 2040, the 1500 road to E700 road is slated to be a future principal arterial. Then I would expect that to be to a different city standard, but I would agree with Chad's comment on that one. But for the future transportation plan, we have it as a principal arterial.
Mm-hmm. And is there a time, does the time projection on that put it outside of the life of the comp plan, or is there a sense of time frame on that?
With Transportation 24, there's not necessarily a time frame. It's really more about the overall network's construction and ability in the future. We would really look at it kind of more in Plan 2040's time frame, which would be getting out in this area would be probably beyond 2040 would be our best guess at the moment.
So we'll be relying pretty much on the township quite a while to make the road improvements there, to widen it, to improve the ditches, to help it be up to increasing traffic, it sounds like. So Chad and Tanya, these are, I'm curious to know, when you worked hard to get those subdivision regulations for the county that we just adopted, and set those higher standards for developments so that with the eye toward annexation in the future, I guess I'm wondering how important are those standards? How important is that that eye toward the future and trying to kind of pull our socks up so that we make things easier for the city of Lawrence in the future for future development and annexations, and not just for road connectivity, but for stormwater management,
If I could,
all the things.
I'd like to jump on
Go ahead.
that. You said something earlier about this being an island that the city would go around. And it really strikes me that that's the outcome that we're putting in place if we do this way, because the problem is that with 3-acre lots, those individual homeowners are going to choose where to put their homes, and they're going to have other improvements on their properties. And so when it's time for the city to build around them and try to include them, there won't be a logical or geometrical arrangement that works with what has happened already. And so this will become an island. It will be lost sort of to the growth of the city. It will be like Miller Acres or Anderson Acres, or the one that's right off 15th Street with the pond in town. It'll be sort of an oddity. And that's, they provide a build out plan, and that's required in the code. I've never seen a build out plan that looks like anything that would ever be built. And, I think maybe the idea behind the build out plan was a good idea, and it's what you're getting at. It's how can we build this right now where it will work in the future? And I don't think that we're covering that hard enough. So we're talking about a zoning request here, but I think when we talk about the actual plat, there's a lot more that we could do to lay that out so that the building envelopes actually fit where they might actually be on a city street one day. I think that's the intent of the build out plan. And that's not really what I think we're seeing here. So, the county is kind of an observer in terms of public works. I mean, we're going to help them with the road standard and probably review the plans and make sure that what is constructed on the cul-de-sac meets what we need today. But then once that's done, it's going to migrate from township maintenance to someday. I mean, I'm looking at the land use. If you go a little bit further east, there's a school property sitting right there that's obviously slated for a school, and it's hundreds of feet away from this development. So we're talking about, we're going to have traffic at a school that's bypassing this sort of hole of 10 or 12 houses on 3 acres each that are not really an efficient use of urban growth area. And I was curious about the low density designation that's referenced in the 2040 plan. And that's 1 to 6 houses per acre. And so what we're putting in here is 1 house per 3 acres. And how are you ever going to get to that with this layout? So it's not that, we can't do what we're talking about doing here today, but I think there's got to be exactly what you're saying. A lot more thought into how it fits the long range situation.
So thanks for that. You just put in a nutshell what I'm really concerned about is that we're, it seems as though we are trying to make something happen now. We're already talking about variances and amendments to our new regulations to make it work, and we're haven't even talked about that school property that's very close by, and a sector plan that really intended a higher density and more use of important land close to a school and close to, again, a major intersection that's just less than 2 minutes away. So yeah, so it's troubling. And so can you name those? So what happens again is when there's a rural subdivision that doesn't really fit well with a city plan, then that rural subdivision, and especially if there's no, if the neighbors don't, if no money's been set aside, if there's no benefit district, if there's no capacity to pay for the improvement to the rural roads to make them city standard, then the expectation is that the city will pay to bring that rural neighborhood up to city standards, or does it just kind of go by the Queens roadway where it's just left as kind of a rural problem in the midst of city growth?
Yeah, so the ones I named were Miller Acres, which is up at North Michigan, North Iowa, and it's still in the county, parts of it, but then there's sort of a city subdivision that attaches to it. And that's been circled by a city. Anderson Acres is the one out on East 23rd Street on the south side, where the old grade school used to be. And then the other one is right there on Monterey Way and 15th Street, where there's a pond. There are some old rural lots there that ultimately did have to be brought into the city because of a sanitary sewer issue. And the utilities department had to go in there and put sanitary sewers in an existing neighborhood, which was incredibly difficult and expensive. And it tore people's properties up and nobody liked it. So, you know, that was very difficult. The economics of bringing an older subdivision with 3-acre lots up to a city standard don't work for anybody, the owners, the city. So, you know, a developer at the outset has the control over all the land. You're not going to have 12 developers working together to make this work in 25 years.
Thanks so much, Chad. So Tanya, do you have, as one of the key people who kind of put the new county rural subdivision regulations together and working with that tier 2, tier 3 system that we have, what are your thoughts in this, and especially with an eye toward kind of already the idea that we're going to make amendments to that set of regulations? Oops. And you know, kind of lower standards. And I mean, how does that set with you? What kind of conversation do you want to have around that?
Tanya Voigt, Douglas County Zoning Director. You know, we just went through this set of zoning regulations, and really I think our goal was to put the burden of the financial cost on the developer. Because we have found that when the city starts to close in on rural subdivisions, that those properties have all changed hands, have different property owners. And at that point, they don't have the financial means to be able to say, yes, I want to hook to city sewer and I want to hook to city water. If they have a system that works perfectly fine, they're usually not up for putting up that money in the forefront. So then the city typically doesn't unilaterally annex or require that annexation. It's a voluntary situation from what I've gathered. And then it's up to the property owner ultimately. And the property owners say, I don't want to foot that bill. And then we sort of inherit, at least in those subdivisions that Chad mentioned, we have a lot of drainage concerns in those subdivisions, every single one of them. Where, you know, they weren't built to city standards. They don't have stormwater runoff calculated and figured out. And we get a lot of drainage complaints and have a lot of flooding on those lots. And so I think those higher standards are something that we wanted to put in place so that we could look at those things. Now, does it need curb and gutter? I would say probably not. So I think there's an aspect of the variance process where city standards really don't apply that far out, but I do think that we increased those standards so that we could request more studies for things like stormwater runoff and changing of ditches and making sure that stormwater is captured, looking at floodplain, looking at the placement of houses, those type of things. And so I would say the waiving of the standard and not requiring that they sign an annexation agreement when the city reaches them is just something that those property owners, to my knowledge, at least in our past experiences, they have not just voluntarily said, I've got a lot of money and I really want to hook to city services.
So I'll, Commissioner Kelly, if you have another set of questions, I'll let you move on with your next thoughts. I'll probably have some more, but I'll listen for a while.
Yeah, I think you asked one that I had about roads. I did have a question, and I'm trying to phrase my questions around the golden factors a little bit. Just trying to be very thoughtful about how we think about this application, and one of them is the character of the area. And I was interested, Mary or Jeff, how we determine how big the character of the area is. When I drove out to the property, I took 1500 Road one time, and I took 6th Street the other time, and in your report and in your recommendation, you're citing a commercial property that is in the corners, and you're citing a commercial development that's in the other southeast corner. And I'm just interested in how you get to that point of character of the area. What is there a typical zone that you use, or do you just, is it 10 miles? Is it 5 miles? Is my question making sense on how we determine what the area is? Because I won't reveal my thoughts, but I'm just interested.
Mary Miller, City County Planner. And when I'm looking at the area, I look at the area that I feel would be impacted by the development, the area that this development could be impacted by. And I don't think if you live 2 miles away, something I do here is going to change the character where you live. You may notice it as you drive by. So there isn't a set standard. These golden factors just say character of the area. And in the city, I usually try to find an area that's bounded by something that creates a unit. In the county, I found the 1 mile to be a pretty reasonable use. If there's a highway and it's within the 1 mile, I don't go across the highway just because you're not going to affect what's on the other side. The highway is the dividing line. So that is just an area that I've determined seems reasonable because we have to set it somewhere. And if I set it too broad, it's not going to have a character. You're going to have many characters. If you go too far to the north, you're going to have all the uses along Highway 40. And it just seems that a way to pull it into where it's a discussable area. And
so in this one, it looks like you used Highway 40 as the northern boundary, East 700 Road as the western boundary, K10 as the eastern boundary, and I don't know the name of that road that's down by the quarry that would be the southern boundary. Is that about right? That's how you determined what the character of the area was?
that's right. I went about a mile, and about a mile, we go south of that, you're at the roads and going into Clinton Park. So I use about a mile radius.
Okay. I'm happy to listen to others at this point.
This is Sarah. One thing I wanted to clarify before commissioners ask other questions. Sometimes when we use the word improvement, when it comes to a road, people assume it's going to be paved. And I want to be very, very clear to anyone listening to this conversation that maybe isn't familiar with that, then when we say improvement, we're not talking about pavement. Correct? Okay, thank you.
And commissioners, if I may, I did find the date for the West of K10 plans initial item. My computer finally gave me the information I was looking for. It occurred in 2009, in the middle of 2009.
Jeff, thank you very much. Okay, as long as I've unmuted myself, I guess I keep looking at this tier 3, and I feel like we're leapfrogging, and I think that kind of feeds some of the concerns that Chad has mentioned. I think we're getting, you know, when you look at tier 2, which requires annexation, and tier 3, which isn't even expected to be, you know, within the plan 2040. But here we are with, you know, looking at something in tier 3 that could lead to eventual problems. And, you know, I'm still questioning the compatible and we'll go with character of the area. You know, I'd mentioned those 2 cluster areas at North 1532 Road, which has five houses, and then East 767, which has 7. And here we're talking about putting 10, and now tonight they're saying maybe even 12. So it's going to exceed anything in this plan area that Mary's looking at. You know, I guess my question is why 10 3-acre lots? Why not, you know, 6 5-acre lots that kind of keep that rural character? And Ms. Wakeman, is there a reason that you thought about 10-acre lots? I mean, to me, if I would think that a 5-acre lot would be much more appealing to purchase, but that's just me. So I didn't know if there's a reason why you went with the 3-acre lots.
Yes, I can answer that. The main reason is it's the criteria of what the application process was, that it was a 3-acre minimum. And based on the way I was mirroring the one of the other developments over on the north side of 40, them are 3-acre lots as well. It's basically been the requirement of what the application process of the process was. So I went with the 10 3-acre lots. You know, a lot of thought went into it. I think the character of the land that you've represented here, it does have the ability to have that character of a 3-acre high standard estate development, and not be cookie cutter homes that you see over on the east side. My vision has always been estate high end scale development.
Okay, thank you.
That high-end development would have to be done in private covenants because the county building code regulations allow double-wide manufactured homes and various different styles of home that would not necessarily be high-end. So that would have to be privately dealt with private covenants through that subdivision.
Thank you, Tanya. And yes, with this subdivision presentation and the process working with Mary Miller and her staff, there are going to be covenants and restrictions of a certain square footage, aesthetics of what the outside's to look like, the intended purposes. It won't be something that modular homes will be available. It will be in excess of probably 2,500 square foot. And if you take that times the county standard of $140 per square foot to build a home, you know, do the math that it will be a high scale division with covenants and restrictions in place.
So just one other quick comment to that is that, you know, the county does not enforce covenants. So the county zoning and codes office, we don't enforce those. And so if a property owner purchased a lot and decided to put something on it that didn't meet the covenants, then that is a private civil situation between that either developer or property owner, or if there's a homeowners association, that's privately processed through a court system that does not involve our office.
So I have a question on Tanya, I remember you said that part of the reason for the new county subdivision regulations was to try to put the burden of the cost of development and improvements, like going from rural to city standard infrastructure, that the cost of that would be on the developer rather than on the city or on even on the citizens necessarily. So is that, I guess in this case, Mrs. Wakeman is considered the developer of this new subdivision. So what happens if we have miscalculated the growth, the rate of growth in this area, and we find that annexation is much sooner than we thought, like the city of Lawrence is really growing in this direction. You know, things are really moving around that Bob Billings interchange. So is there a mechanism by which this developer needs to have funds ready for annexation responsibilities, or is that just left for future hopes? Or how do you manage the this situation when the intention is to try and have the developer absorb those costs and have any mechanism here to make that happen, and we don't have we have a variance that says that we even landowners protest annexation and protest the cost of those improvements. Anybody?
Well, Mary Miller, City County Planner, and that was a kind of a long question. I'll try not to lose track of it. But one thing I want to point out is that when we did the subregs, we were really looking at drainage. We put in a requirement that if you do a plat, you would do drainage studies if required, or you would give us more transportation information if requested. So we could look at those kind of things and make those changes. We did not even notice the public improvement standard that says a road in the UGA has to be built to city street standards. And so that wasn't something we added. That standard was left over from 2006 because we haven't used it since then. All land divisions had gravel cross-access easements. So while we didn't consider it with the revised regulations, it may be something we do want to consider if we're looking at this text amendment. It'd be something to wonder, do we want to take that out, or do we want to require the agreements? You know, there's ways to make that work, and I think that's a good point. I just want to point out that we aren't getting a variance to our new subregs. Those are still in effect. And so they will have to sign an annexation agreement. And the annexation agreement includes language that they won't protest benefit districts. It's just not as firm as the actual agreement not to protest. And you can always protest the amount you're charged for the benefit district, but just means you're not going to protest the actual formation. And that could be a condition. I don't know, you may ask Jeff if you can put a condition that the annexation agreement, you know, would more clearly state that the formation of a benefit district would not be protested. And I don't know if it's in there, maybe we could beef it up, but that would be a Jeff question. And that would take care of some of the questions about who has to pay for those road improvements.
Thank you, Mary.
And does that agreement, does that filed on the deeds, so as the properties change hands, they would be able to, is that an addendum, or how does the next property owner, how are they aware?
Agreements not to protest get recorded, and normally they're noted on the final plat. Annexation agreements also get recorded, so they would follow with the notice, they can be also noted on the final plat. So if a property owner looks at their final plat or at their title work, they should see that these agreements have been done, but a lot of times people just don't look at it.
I can add a little to that. You know, I was around with the city in the late 90s when things were really booming. And if you think about like Monterey Way going north, as things developed in quarter section sizes, developers were willing to sign these kind of agreements because it felt like things were really going to move fast enough that, you know, they could easily make that work. And Queens Road is actually a remnant of those days. Those developments on the east side went in under that kind of view that, you know, we're going to put in 300 houses at a time, and it's really no big deal to sign this agreement to not protest paying for part of that road. And there were a handful of developers involved in those conversations. And then with Queens Road, what's interesting is there was the economic stall that occurred right then and left that undone. And then when we all came back around to it 15 or 20 years later, those people were gone. The developments that wanted to get going were not party to that. And all of the existing residents had no clue about any of that. So that's really how that came back to catch everybody. And what we're looking at with this situation is because that development intensity is not there, you know, it's going to be very hard to put those requirements on people as they develop a 20-acre piece, or, you know, try to infill some of these existing areas. And it's going to be hard to piece that together. The city is not going to have the funds to be the backbone of a project to build that road up to the standards that are needed. So, you know, if you say there's going to be a development just west of there someday that's actually going to be 200 houses, it's going to be very hard to connect that development over to K10 when this interim section has not been improved. And it's going to be a real question about who pays for that.
One thing I would note is I'm not by any means an expert on the law regarding agreements not to protest and those kind of details there, but I don't know if that is something that could be amended at this time. So I would hazard to say that it may not be, but I don't know that to be certain. So just something to be mindful of.
Commissioners, do we have further questions? I'm assuming some folks who want to give public comment, and after public comment, we usually allow the applicant to make some comments. So I'm expecting the applicant probably has some thoughts. Would now be a good time for public comment, or do you have more questions you want to ask?
I'd like to ask David a question or two real quick, as long as he's here. Hi, David, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to follow up. And my comment about East 767, I know that's a private road, so I'm not saying I don't know what the township did with that road or what it's made of. I know it's a private road, so my apologies if I gave the wrong impression about how the township's taking care of that. But I just, you know, I travel that road, you know, periodically and on a regular basis, really, just to kind of check on things, because I do on occasion get calls about it. And, you know, the other option, not just 1500, but also 800 coming off of Highway 40 is another way that people will be getting there. And both those roads, I know that you said that, you know, it's been a rough couple of years, and I understand that, you know, last year with all the floods and crazy rains and everything else. But so, I mean, what if that continues? Or, you know, what after a couple years, I think you mentioned each household, maybe 5 trips a day to town or something. So 10 times 5, you're talking 50 extra cars on those roads a day. I mean, the wear and tear, and then let's say we have a couple bad years again. I mean, how do you see Kanawha Township? Because I remember sitting in on your budget meetings, and I know that, you know, I give the townships a lot of credit for what you are able to do. Watching your neighbors, you know, tax dollars very closely, but I mean, if there's a chance that this as a tier 3 is not going to be part of the city until well after 2040, I mean, can you see that being sustainable for you, Kanawha Township, maybe having to put a greater percentage of their road funds into one particular road to serve a limited number of your constituents? Does that
Yeah,
make
I mean,
sense?
go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, because it sounds like it could become a very expensive project. And so what does that do to the rest of the Kanawha Township roads? Does that take away from them?
Yeah, so no, we try to improve certain areas when we can. So most years in our budget, we're going to focus on an area either that's a large tube replacement or whatever it is. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, last year with rock being triple of normal, we couldn't do anything and all the damage. Going forward, I would hope that as a township, we can continue to upgrade some of these higher traveled roads as they get higher traveled. We kind of just have to go with the changes of the times. We've experienced that with our part of Queens Road, because we have part of Queens Road, and it's a very, very high traffic road, which is a challenge. But yes, as time goes forward, we may have to raise our mill levies. Honestly, I'll have to tell you that. I mean, as people come out, that'll be, we'll have to look at it, I guess, if that answered your question.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to find out if it's, sustainable and the extra wear and tear and possibilities of a couple bad years again, where that, because you'll obviously have to prioritize, and we got a lot of roads to cover out there. So I didn't know if this was just going to take a greater and greater percentage of your budget each year to maintain the extra traffic on that road.
So where it's hit the level of what we call our chloride level, is 250 cars per day. It's kind of more at our higher maintenance level. So I don't think it's going to change greatly with that. With the chloride process on the gravel roads, there's less maintenance. There is expense of the chloride, but there's less maintenance of the road. So I don't see the 10-15% extra traffic as being a great problem here in the future, if we can get those few little problem areas addressed.
Okay, thank you, David.
Yes.
Any other questions before we open it up for public comment? Okay. This is a regular agenda item, so we invite public comment. If you're there at the courthouse, you just need to let Sarah know and she can help get you connected. And if you're online, you just need to use the raise your hand function. So go ahead and raise your hand if you want to speak on this item, or check in with Sarah at this time.
We don't have anyone at the courthouse to comment.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone online?
I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay. Oh, wait, here come a few.
Gina, go ahead. Oh.
Hi, Gina, can you hear me?
Gina?
Okay. All right, let's try it now. Sorry, Cassidy had to show me how to do this. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, Gina, go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, Nancy and Michelle and Patrick, thank you. I think you guys have asked some fantastic questions tonight, and actually several of them that I had even been thinking about. I guess as my livelihood as a rancher and a farmer, I would hope that the planning commission would try to make it out to the western side of Douglas County and just take a look at some of these areas and roads and grasses and farmland, etc. Back to the one question of did the residents on the west side of 10 Highway know about the Planning Commission, the future plans, this and that? It would be really nice to be a part of that rather than finding out. This has been a real educational process, definitely for me, and I think a lot of people in the neighborhood. A lot of people, in some cases, this is the third letter that has been written about the concerns and the opposition of the subdivision that we've written in. I'm just going to go through some things that I asked in my letter. The neighborhood all rallied together on this, and the ones that couldn't sign the petition for the protest that were 1,000 feet, we put it together a general petition and we got 109 signatures. Patrick, the attorney, had mentioned that a lot of those weren't in the area, and mine was probably one of them because my address is 367 Highway 40. My father-in-law, we have a cow-calf partnership down the road 3/4 of a mile to the west of where the subdivision is going to be at 727 North 1500 Road. So I also have a lot of, we had a lot of people on there that just simply travel the road. Some people from North Lawrence that are friends of ours that travel the road that come out to take care of livestock. They have a horse boarded at our place, different things like that. So the neighborhood has gotten very passionate about this whole situation. We do have a lot of bike traffic from town. We have runners, walkers. We have the KU cross country team practices out here some, and I think that they enjoy running the hills and in the country. It is a tier 3 property. And, I am curious, I guess, at what point do you kind of shut down or slow down the development so you can leave green space and areas of farm ground and ag ground to feed people in the city. According to the staff finding, the review of the soil data in the area that shows high quality agriculture, we used to hay the ground there at Wakeman's for 30, 40 years. And that would have been the native piece that they are putting in the protection piece now, I guess. So I wonder, I have to ask why at approximately 47.8% of the site contains woods and silt loam, and which is prime farmland. Journal World quoted it as being 57.8, I think. So somebody's got a typo somewhere, but I was just going by the agenda when I was looking back through the Planning Commission notes. So I don't understand why we would tear out prime farmland and not utilize situations like that. One of the comments that was made in, I don't remember whether it's a staff finding, I think it was, the prime farmland and size. So we talked about it being prime farmland, but it's not a large area of farm ground contiguous. And that is very uncommon around Douglas County. I have several friends that do row crop, and I visited with them, and it is extremely common for them to only have 20-acre fields. 20 to 40-acre fields is about the average for around here. So Mary's property was a very average size, a piece of farm ground. I guess as far as the native grass and the stream and the trees, I'm curious to know who's going to maintain that. That needs to be being native grass. It needs to be burnt. It needs to be mowed. It needs to be sprayed. So who manages that? Does the developer, does the people in the housing development? Because if it's not mowed, burnt or sprayed, you're just going to get a bunch of cedar trees growing up in there, and then you're not going to have anything. On the agenda from the Planning Commission, you know, it says the fiscal impact to the city is $0, but somebody's going to have to pay for it. The taxes, the taxpayers, that kind of thing's going to affect all of us. When the variance request was passed, you know, that is a real concern to a lot of us because we see other developers, we see other landowners that may want to develop or subdivide on down the road. And what kind of Pandora box does this open up? Because if you find a hardship case or break the rules or choose to do the variance for one person, how do you turn the next person down? So I think that that opens up a can of worms that is going to be hard to shut down. Let's see. One of the things that I think it was Michelle even said to Adam Raines earlier about the how do you figure the hardship for one person and not another when they were talking earlier. So I guess I'm kind of thinking along that same line. What kind of precedent does it set for the standards and the regulations and the restrictions on any developing out there? The land certainly got other opportunities. I was glad that Michelle had brought up the leapfrog development because that is something that has been brought up in past commissions. So when I looked it up, that past commission groups had said that, you know, they weren't going to do leapfrog development where they would jump out necessarily like a mile from the last place and go develop, for instance, in tier 3 to just to develop, I guess. So, you know, we feel like if it's something that's going to be done, it really needs to be done right and follow all the rules and regulations. Concern of the temporary set aside acreage, what will happen to it, as you guys have asked as well. If it's not annexed, which obviously the deal's not supposed to be technically annexed into the city in the next 2 years. So if this doesn't happen, you know, we're just open for more houses out there, I guess. Let's see.
Gina,
Yes.
so we don't have really a time limit. We only have 2 people who want public comment, but if you could finish up, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yep, I will, sorry. So as the agenda states, and I kind of, you guys have covered this too, Plan 2040 revised the urban growth into 3 tiers. Tier 1 is within the city limits where there's growth encouraged and expected to occur first. Tier 2 is in close proximity to the city limits and the area that is expected to develop and annex within the life of the comprehensive plan. And Tier 3 is the remainder of the urban growth area and not expected to annex within the life of the Plan 2040. So just concerned about why it's even being considered. So I think that was all my, oh, I had just one quick thing and I'll shut up, sorry. I took a picture of the slide that Mary Miller had up and it stated, identified sensitive lands that define Douglas County's character. Agriculture soils for the future, and maintain working lands and high quality agriculture soils for the future generations. So I guess, you know, when I saw that slide, I just have to ask, so why are we developing over prime farmland and once again in Tier 3? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gina. Yep. Hi, Julie. Go ahead and unmute and address the commission.
Okay, can you see me now? There we go. Sorry, it like went away for a second, then it was there, so I didn't know exactly what happened. So anyway, I think most of my, questions and concerns have been brought up tonight. but there are definitely still some major considerations that need to be resolved before we get to this point of annexing something or, letting a subdivision be in tier 3. There's some kind of major differences between 2040 and the K-10 plan. And I think if it hasn't been updated since 2006, I think that's something we could definitely look at. I think I told every one of you guys when you came out here, I am very pro-development, but I totally agree. I think there has to be a way that it's done responsibly and in a timely manner. So there's a lot of stuff that, in tier 1 and tier 2 that really need to, it would be interesting to see what direction that takes. And especially in tier 2, I mean, that's going to really tell you the story for possibly tier 3. So I think that would be a good place to kind of maybe wait and see how those get developed before we start making some real tight restrictions for tier 3. I was glad that the roads issue were addressed. A lot of the neighbors had that concern. And I am really curious though, Michelle, you brought up some great points, and thank you for asking, David. Those were kind of my questions as well. I was just curious how often the budgets in it go up. If the mill levy has to be raised, that's a little concerning, but the road definitely needs some major improvements to that. And as far as the character of the area, I'm so glad you guys all took the time to come out and drive. It really has a very country feel. And, visiting with our neighbors, this has been a really interesting time. A lot of them, these farms have been in their families, for years. One guy even said like 100 years. So a lot of this stuff, I think these people definitely plan on keeping it as farm ground. And, even the piece that's in question tonight, that's been in farm ground since its, fruition as the family. So I think that's something that we really have to think. I don't remember, Michelle, you asked when 800 and 1500 roads were, if we were notified if it was going to be part of or what the plan was for that intersection. I don't remember if we were or not. I know development's coming, but I would love to be. I think this has been a good forum so that we can have these discussions, and hopefully it'll help with further planning down the road. And last thing I'm just going to say, people come to the country because they want to be in the country. And that's why we're all here. That was a statement that a lot of the neighbors kept saying when we were visiting. So that's kind of my biggest point to y'all. And I do want to thank you each and every one. I talked to a lot of you, the planner, Mary Miller, she helped, Tanya Voigt, Chad Voigt, and each of the commissioners. So thank you for your time, and thanks for helping educate us on all this.
Thank you, Julie. Is there any other member of the public who'd like to provide public comment?
I'm not seeing any.
Thanks, Jill. Okay, we usually give, I don't think we usually give. We always give the applicant a chance to respond to some of the public comments and maybe some of the ideas that they've heard here. So turn it over to Mary Wickman, the applicant, and Patrick Watkins for responses.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I'll have a couple of comments, and I'll allow Mary to speak if she chooses. But some of the messages that I've been hearing in this discussion are confusing. And they're confusing not only on a development level, but they're confusing on a planning level, which is problematic for landowners. But if you're also financially dependent upon the land that you own that's in these urban growth areas or that are subject to these long-term plans, it's not just confusing, it's devastating and it's maddening. What we have here is a landowner that's tried to follow every rule and every directive that they've been given, and they've received support for this. They've looked around at this area. They're as familiar with this neighborhood as anybody is. And if you expand the scope of the area that Mary has set, and you look just to the east, you have a 40 parcel development there. If you look to the northwest, Commissioner DeRusso, in the same areas that you're looking at, and you take the 80 acre areas in those areas. While they're not 10 lot subdivisions, those 80 acres have 10 lots on them. They're not specifically subdivided to include a 10 lot subdivision, but there's a number of parcels that have access right to the frontage. So from our perspective, we see that the discussion has really been trending towards this idea that the character of the area is not perhaps ready for this sort of rural residential. We fiercely believe that this is already happening. This is happening not only here, but it's happening further west. And we're following the trend. These people obviously are enjoying their rural homesteads, and we're trying to enhance and add more opportunities for that to happen. There's long-range plans at issue here, and our biggest issue is that we are swiftly abandoning a lot of the long-range planning that's taken place up to this point. And we're doing so, in my opinion, because we've been sidetracked and derailed in this conversation about a discussion about annexation that I think is so far in the future that it doesn't merit the level of detail that has been given. But it's also been confusing from the applicant's perspective because she's following every directive that has been given to her. Certainly the final plat could be considered an opportunity to add more restrictions or more review or consideration on how this particular development could meet the county's needs or long-term planning goals. But I'm not sure exactly what to do with the county engineer's comments that perhaps we should be waiting for more dense development if we're really going to follow what the long-term plan calls for on the K10 area plan. Again, I think the character of the area, if you were to ask us and you were to take a larger view of this particular area, you would see a number of developments that are approximately this size. This one takes into account things that haven't been taken into account before, and it's doing so at the direction of the comprehensive plan and the West of K10 plan, which both recommend acknowledging and recognizing environmental factors. We've tried to be conscious. The applicant has taken extra steps to be conscious of these things and has tried to do it. To provide a development that saves native prairies, that recognizes a number of things that other developments haven't had to in the past. We know that things have changed a little bit with the new comprehensive plan, but they don't necessarily change everything that's gone into the West of K10 plan. One of our biggest concerns is that if the city is really changing the city has changed its annexation policy, and it is markedly more difficult to annex into the city. Denying an application like this that's received staff support, received planning commission support, and that was unanimous planning commission support as the applicant recalls it. But it's essentially doubling down on prohibiting development on the outskirts of town. We think there are serious consequences to that. We think what's been proposed here is very sensible, and we don't think it's a major change to the character of the area. Mary, if there are additional comments you'd like to make, I'll allow it, or I'd pass it over to you. Thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate all them comments. The only closing comments that I would add is that I do appreciate the time this evening for the County Commissioners Forum here and the good conversation and discussion, and just ask for your consideration on approving this rezoning request. Thank you so much for your time. It is well served.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Patrick. We'll bring it back up to the commission for discussion. If you have further questions, certainly we can ask those, and then motions would be helpful.
I think all of my questions have been answered. Oh, sorry, Nancy.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
No, I just was gonna say, I think all of my questions have been answered, so it's all yours.
Well, I'll start. There's so much there, it's hard to summarize, and I'm going to try not to ramble. But I guess I would frame everything with the starting point that this is, these are new subdivision regulations that we are working hard to, put into practice. And I think this particular proposal has shown some of the points that we're going to need to work on. Especially as we consider the possibility of the struggle we're having between tier 2 and tier 3, the struggle of kind of skipping over one tier and putting what seems like relatively dense housing into a neighborhood, but not dense enough housing if we take into consideration what the long range plan set in place. So I think I think the thing that has occurred to me in all of this is this started, I think, with the applicant's desire to build a house, and little by turned into the desire to build a home, then into dividing the lot, and then more divisions, and then a rural subdivision at what I understood to be a 10 parcel subdivision, but I understand from Patrick that it might become a 12 parcel subdivision. And what triggered all of that was the presence of some sensitive lands. Of course, all of the prime ag land is sensitive, but in this case, the opinion was that the native prairie and stream corridor took precedence. And so the presence of those special properties on the land triggered the possibility of doing a cluster development, which allows the developer to put in the maximum number of parcels and maximum number of residences with some higher standards set by the county. But those higher standards have already been taken back to the Planning Commission and given a variance, and then also a direction to staff to go back and reconsider these subdivision regulations to see if we need to make some changes between tier 2 and tier 3, and see about the annexation agreements and whether what we do about the costs of improvements for annexation. So I just feel like we've kind of started a slippery slope here of setting about to do our subdivisions in a different way, and already finding that we've got some problems and some issues that we need to solve. So I feel like in this instance, the developer has gotten the maximum density allowed. There's the hope of some preserved native prairie, but there's no promise of it. There's no conservation easement on the front side, only the hope that the land would be picked up by the city at annexation, but no promise of that. So the very thing that triggered this cluster development is not a sure thing. And we're setting precedents with this project, but already giving it variances. So that's a future opportunity for future developers to expect the same kind of lessening of standards. And And I take the neighbors' concerns and complaints about the road and the, the impact of a new development and higher density residential seriously. I don't doubt that there's some mourning over the idea that it won't be the pristine residential area that they're used to. I think that just comes with growth, but I do have concerns about whether 1500 Road will be able to support all the different kinds of traffic that have to travel on it safely. It already sounds like it's a difficult and kind of troubled road and sometimes unsafe, and then we're adding to that with more traffic and no certainty that the township budget will be able to make the improvements necessary to support that, even if the desire is there. So my, and then listening to our own county engineer make the case and our own zoning and codes director make the case that this is creating a rural subdivision that will be very difficult for the kind of future development that is likely to come that way. We're creating a problem rather than solving a problem, it sounds like. So rather than go on and on and on, I'd like to hear what the to not support this proposal.
So maybe I'll share some thoughts. First, I heard Mr. Watkins say there's frustration there, and I understand that frustration. But I am concerned that we haven't given enough tools to our community to really process some of these applications through yet, this being the first one. And so I understand the frustration, and as we figure this out, but I think we need more time. There's just, I'm going to go through, I've got sort of 4 or 5 things here that sort of give me pause on it when thinking about those golden factors. The first would be the conformance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has tier 1, 2, and 3. And as I mentioned before, I think there's conflict with the K-10 plan and the tiers. I think there's also a community benefit part, which if that property was to be annexed in, and I think Commissioner Thellman did a really good job of sort of explaining like what happens 2 years later. It seems like if it was in tier 1 or tier 2, especially in tier 2, when that property came online, it would be a community benefit. So that gift of density, that gift of infrastructure of curb and gutter would make sense for the city to annex it. If the city's not going to annex it for a minimum of 20 years, and certainly annexation patterns can change, but if that's the guidance we're getting right now, and the response is, well, it'll be, we'll hold on to those sensitive lands for 2 years, and then maybe they might be interested. That I don't see how that jives with our comprehensive plan. So I think we need to do some work there, and it just doesn't seem to match that for me. The character of the area and using the one property that's out towards the northwest corner, I think that's the reason we redid our zoning regs in the county. I hate to use that as an example to follow when that's maybe the reason we're doing some new zoning. And when we say phrases like relatively dense, that's a cue to me that we're not talking about the character of the area. When our neighbors are saying that seems like a lot. I mean, just when I put my mind around it and saw the drawing, that doesn't look like the character of the area, just a eye test. And comparing it with the one in the northwest corner, to me, is using a bad apple and saying, well, all these apples aren't good because that one's bad. That's probably not a good example, but I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling with the conformance to the comprehensive plan because we're coming up with a text amendment. So we're already changing the comprehensive plan. We're changing our plans. I'm really interested to hear how the Planning Commission and the city plan to address tier 1, 2, and 3 going forward. If it's through a variance, that makes me super uncomfortable. We've got to work together in these plans. I would really like to see tier 2. And there are communities that have done this. I've seen it where, yes, they put in curb and gutter and streets and the whole deal, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense at the time they do it, but they're planning for the future. And if that's what's being said that this project is, then, you know, I'm going to disagree with Tanya. I do think they need curb and gutter out there. I do think they need sidewalks out there, because if the plan is that it's going to get absorbed into the city. I was really glad that Chad brought up 15th and Monterey. I walk that neighborhood just about every night. There's no sidewalks there. There's no curbs out there. It would take a significant expense, not only for money, but also for just gnashing of teeth and community conversation to get that neighborhood to change. And they have some serious drainage problems that do jeopardize the health and safety. They had someone almost drowned out there due to the way the lake is the water comes into the lake and clearing out that drain during some heavy rains we just had. So that brings me to public health and safety. And if we're not going to improve those curbs and gutters and those things, I just don't see, or roads, I don't see how it doesn't have a detrimental effect to the public health and safety of the people in those neighborhoods. So I just want to sort of articulate those golden factors as I think about it. There's lots of things that we could talk about, but those are just some of my thoughts, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Thellman. I mean, not Commissioner Thellman, Commissioner DeRusso, although Commissioner Thellman wanted to talk, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm not going to go through and list everything that Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Thellman have. I will say that those are all items that I had listed. I do want to, I will continue to say that I have concerns about compatible with the character of the area, especially the rural character of it. I'm not anti-growth. Some 5-acre lots out there. I mean, that's, to me, more compatible with the rural character of the land. 10 or 12 3-acre lots doesn't do a whole lot for me as far as when I think of rural character. I really worry about the safety aspect, and David, I do appreciate you being here tonight. But like when I look at the staff report, item number 7, one of the things it talks about is increasing density in an area could have a negative impact if the additional traffic would require additional maintenance and improvements to the road. And then it goes on to say that while the proposed development will have a higher density than the surrounding area, this can be accommodated by the existing roadway. But as we already know, have seen and heard, that's not the case. It is going to require additional maintenance. It is going to require improvements to the road. It's going to cost the township, more money to maintain the road. Well, I should say those roads. We keep talking about 1500, but I think we have to really look at 800 East 800 Road also, because that's main road coming off of Highway 40 that people may be taking. So you've got, I think the mileage on that from Highway 40 to the proposed development is, sorry, it's like 1.5 miles, I think, or just under 1.5 miles. And then to get back to Bob Billings on 1500, it's approximately 1 mile. I mean, that's a lot of road for the township to have to maintain, and talk about maybe an extra 50 cars a day on there. So David, I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your comments, but it is I do find it a concern, because as we all know, we can say things about budgets, but future township officials and future county commissions can't really hold future, or current ones can't hold the future ones to certain budget things. So will the desire be there? Will the funds be there? I'm still gonna, I just think it's a safety issue, and I know, David, you think it can be done, but I mean, I'm looking at this could be possibly 20 years of having to focus on that road. And you said it, it's already one that you guys spent a lot of time and effort on, but we're talking about adding a lot more traffic to it. So that safety is a big issue, and like I said, the rural character. Like 3 acre lots aren't very big lots. I'm sorry, you just like popping up a Lawrence subdivision out there in the middle of a farm field, and to me that's not rural character. Like I said, 6 lots out there, big nice lots with nice houses on them. That's, to me, that maintains some sort of rural character. But it, as Mary said, it does fit within the cluster neighborhoods which we've set up. So that is the minimum, and there's nothing against that. I just don't think that it fits the rural character, but that goes back probably to us when we approved it. Not much we can do about that. And then just one other thing, I know we keep talking about the long range plans and annexation, and annexation, I'm not, that's, who knows with annexation, but Jeff, I think it was you that mentioned that there were a couple of these sector plans that you guys thought were going to have to be revisited, and this is one of them. So how is that possibly going to change that area out there? Those are my thoughts without going into everything that Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Thelman already mentioned.
So I'm trying to read I'm reading the feeling of the commission, and one of the things we want to do is make sure that the motion we make is accurate and legally sound, I guess is the right word to say. So one of the things I would recommend that we do is direct staff to prepare findings consistent with denial based on the discussion of the golden factors this evening. I want to get a sense from my colleagues. I can make that motion. That's one of our options tonight, is to direct staff to do something and ask them to come back with specific language to those golden factors which we have discussed here. So I'll go ahead and make that motion and look for a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Sarah, did you get what you needed there? Jeff, did you get what you needed there?
Yes, Commissioner. I guess I would say is that in terms of when we would bring that back before the commission, with generally our agenda timeline is tomorrow at noon, and it is a shorter time frame too because of the holiday weekend. So I would really suggest that we staff be given time to bring that back on this, on the 16th.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
And is that the one we're not meeting, Michelle? Oh,
That we're not meeting on the 16th, it's 23rd.
so it would need to be the 23rd.
Yeah, if that's as quick as we can get it done, that's, and we understand. Yeah. Okay, I want to thank all the members of the public who came out. Thank you to the applicant and applicant's representative for coming and for sharing your thoughts. Let's move on to the next portion of our agenda, which is appointments.
Okay, we have appointments. So I want to thank Tanya and Tina and Robin and Assistant Fire Chief Clint Ortenberger. So we have some appointments and some reappointments. I guess we'll just, Gerald, is it Wolitz, would like to be reappointed to the BZA. I guess I would nominate or move to reappoint him.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Andrew Spurlock would like to be reappointed to the Code of Appeals Board. So I move to reappoint him.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Chuck Folks would like to be, I move to approve Chuck Folks to the Code of Appeals Board.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Move to reappoint John Tall to Fire District Number 3 Board of Directors.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Appoint Richard Hurd to position number 4 of the Fire District Number 3 Board of Directors.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 And appoint John Hay to position appoint John Hay to position number 2 for the Fire District Number 3 Board of Directors.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 That's all I have this evening.
Well done, Commissioner DeRusso. Look at that.
Strong work.
Well,
Thank you.
It's great to have folks out there that want to serve their community. So, and thank you again, Tanya, for your help.
Any other appointments this evening, Commissioners?
Nope.
Okay. Seeing none, it's time to move on to Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous, and we usually start this with Sarah.
Thank you, Commissioners. I want to verify, did we do general public comment?
Hey, good call, Sarah. Thank you very much. I just missed that altogether. Let's get that in there. So, that's why we hire Sarah. So general public comment will be at the end of each meeting with a limit of 1 comment per person. The commission reserves the right to place a time limit of 3 minutes per speaker if desired. Individuals may not give unused time to other speakers. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. All comments should be directed to the county commission. Sarah, is there anyone at the courthouse to give public comment?
There is not.
Is there anyone online who would like to provide public comment?
Yep.
No.
Okay. Now we'll go to Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous. Sarah?
Sorry. Thank you, Commissioners. In your packet and online on our online agenda system, it includes my weekly memo for the week. Specifically, I did want to point out to the commissioners that on the weekly memo this week, I included information related to several of the umbrella grants or organizing grants for the CARES Act that the commission, or that we asked that we would review with the commission. And so those are attached to the packet. I know it's a late hour and it's the commissioners, I don't know if you've had a chance to review those or if you would like a little bit more time to review them before we get back to the organizations. I know they are eager to get the information and be ready to start promoting the programs, but I, you know, this is, the commissioners have just seen them today.
Sarah, I've taken a look at them. I do want to direct you to the DLI one. I think has a typo.
It does.
Yeah, about hospitality businesses in that second sentence.
Correct. I assume it's a typo, and I will definitely follow up on that with DLI.
Yeah. And I'd just like some more time to review them and visit with staff a little bit about some ideas that I have, and then maybe we could talk about it next week. I know we're not getting approved by the state yet, and I know they're dying to get those applications out, but I'd like to have a little more time. I don't know how the others feel.
I was going to ask for some more time as well. I'm pretty familiar with one of them, but I'd like to look at the others as well. And I do have a suggestion on the LRA one that I'm most familiar with. So if we could till next week, that would be great.
I'd appreciate some more time also.
I think that's not a problem, commissioners. I'll just make sure they're included in, would you like them to be on the formal agenda so that we could just say discussion of the umbrella programs? I just don't, you know, we talked about here that in essence, that these aren't technically approvals per se, but it's an opportunity for the commission to have discussion and feedback.
Yeah, that would be fine for me, Sarah, or we could even have it on administrator miscellaneous. I don't, it's probably good to be a discussion item on our agenda, but not something we'd vote on.
Okay. And I do believe we are still missing at least one more. I think there's another child care aware one coming from a child care aware of Kansas, I believe, that's not been received. So I'm hopeful that we get it soon as well.
Yeah, so maybe that's the best of all worlds if we can get that last one in there and then just promise these folks that we'll be done with the review next week. That it's got to be frustrating, though. I know everybody's just anxious to get their notices out to their people, but we do want to get it right as much as possible.
I do want to say that I reviewed them a little bit. I read through them once this afternoon, and I think they're very much on the right track. I don't want to give the impression that that at least I don't have major changes to make to them. I think they're real close, but I do have a few suggestions I'd like to visit with staff about.
I think that's perfectly fine, commissioners, and I have really talked to most of these organizations that it's very important here that folks understand that until we receive approval from the state, that all of these programs may not be approved. So I actually think, while I know the timing is tight, another week would give us a little bit more time to get closer to that, and so that we can you know, not build expectations up too much if for some reason the state were to deny a part of the program. So I'll add them to our agenda for discussion and review for next week's agenda.
Thank you.
Anything else, Sarah?
That's all I have, commissioners.
Commissioners, any other miscellaneous items?
I would like to say that it's very nice to see your faces. Oh, and there goes Nancy. Nancy just disappeared. But I would think that our constituents you know, maybe it's easier to communicate with them when they can see our faces and we're not staring at some computer screen and only our eyeballs or our ears showing. So, but it is good to see you.
It is good, and thanks. I noticed we seem to have better attendance in our Zoom meetings than we have when we were in person. So that's an interesting observation. Maybe it's just the agenda items, but yeah. All right. Anything else, commissioners? If not,
I just want to thank Chad and Tanya especially for spending their evening with us. It was helpful and much appreciated.
Thank you, Chad.
Yeah, thank you both.
Happy to be here.
I just want one of those big trees for my background that Tanya has. That's an amazing piece of artwork there. That's great. All right, with that, we are adjourned.